across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. We are, of course, naturally covering the full extent of what has happened in Manchester. We know 2 people have died following that attack on the Heaton Park synagogue. This is the northern part of Manchester. 3 others in a serious condition. The suspect was shot dead by police, and bomb disposal units are investigating suspicious items found on his person. We will naturally bring you the latest and any emerging news from this horrific story that happened just a few hours ago. Also this afternoon, Kemi Badenoch plans to repeal the Climate Change Act 2008. She's looking at scrapping net zero targets to prioritise economic growth. She argues that Labour's climate policies raise costs without cutting emissions. Here's a question. Can the Conservatives turn it around? I'm not asking this as a joke. Can the Conservatives turn it around? We'll speak to a couple of commentators who think they possibly can. And Labour plans to tighten asylum rules, ending automatic settlement rights and family reunions for refugees. No, not Reform UK, Labour. New measures aim to deter illegal crossings and include stricter settlement conditions, migrant camps and partnerships with Europe to tackle smuggling gangs. This is right up the Nigel Farage book of how to do things. Today it's Keir Starmer. Your thoughts on that? Can the Tories turn it around? We'll take your voice notes on this one as well if you want to jump the queue. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find it. Do you know what? It's chapter 5016 of the UK's changing political landscape. Our politicians, it seems, will say anything in order to hoover up the popular vote. Previous cherished policies are being lobbed into the bin in favour of playing catch-up with other more popular ideas, whether it's Starmer getting tough on immigration, as you heard, or the Conservatives today totally changing direction on net zero. Either way, the old world of philosophical ideas and political blueprints is gone forever. Much of this, of course, is about chasing the tail of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Labour and the Tories would say this is nonsense, and they're just reacting to changing times. Either way, we're now in new territory when it comes to defining what our politicians actually stand for. Now, some people argue that's a good thing. The idea that you're sort of entrenched within certain parameters of political thought has been the problem all along. You know, move out of it, change, morph, evolve, etc. Is that what they're doing here? Can the Conservatives turn it around? I mean, really? They had 14 years in power. I appreciate 5 of those within coalition. Much of it was down to the Brexit vote. And then, of course, we had a lockdown and COVID. So it was never, ever really a clear run. Are they in a position to turn things around? Today, we see this new emerging type of politics in action. The Conservatives have pledged to scrap the UK's landmark climate change legislation and replace it with a strategy for cheap and reliable energy. This is the Climate Act 2008, which put the target for cutting emissions into law. It was introduced, by the way, by none other than Chief Half-Wit Ed Miliband. He was the man that was responsible for all of that. But it was strengthened under Theresa May. The Tories embraced this. Today, Kemi Badenoch says her party wanted to leave a cleaner environment for our children, but argued Labour's laws tied us in red tape, loaded us with costs and did nothing to cut global emissions. Naturally, environmental groups are furious. They are seething at this. Their much-loved faith melting away like a polar ice cap back in 1993. Do you remember when they used to melt? They said the move would be an act of national self-harm, while Labour said it would be an economic disaster and a total betrayal of future generations. Who is right on this? And do you think the Conservatives, based on this, can actually turn it around? I did say, didn't I, the other day when we had, Reform saying one thing about their immigration policy and the Labour Party saying something frighteningly similar, but apparently very different because the Reform one was racist and theirs was very kind and understanding. That's usually how these things work. Could it be that the Conservatives, and they're have their conference in Manchester, of course, from this weekend. We'll be covering all of that. Could the Tories actually do the unthinkable and just slide through the middle ground there and hoover up a chunk of votes on the way? Will we get to a stage in a few years' time when elements of reform are not making the sense they used to? The Labour Party have completely gone and self-flagellated and eaten themselves into oblivion. And the Tories are back, the phoenix from the blue ashes. Is that really possible? 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Let's get a word on this. And the other big stories of the day. Alex Dean is with us. Alex, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian, what a terrible day. It
is a terrible day, unless I think it's appropriate that we actually start on that story. 2 people have died, as we've been reporting, following that attack at a synagogue in North Manchester. This is the Heaton Park Synagogue, very well attended. Of course, it was a very special day and a reason that synagogue would have been busy and many people would have been around at that point. Police have said 3 more members of the public are in a serious condition. We've heard from the Prime Minister in the last hour. He's been in Copenhagen. He is flying back, but here's what he had to say.
The attack in Manchester this morning is absolutely shocking, and all of our thoughts are with those affected. I'm on my way back to London. When I arrive, I will chair an emergency COBRA meeting. I'm already able to say that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country, and we will do everything to keep our Jewish community safe. I've spoken to Mark Gardner of the CST and Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, and I want to thank the emergency services for the speed of their response.
Well, all the usual rules apply here, I suppose, Alex. You know, we don't know motivation. People can speculate, people can guess. We know that the person that appears to be responsible was shot by a player, looks to have been shot dead, although, as I hear it, there's not actually full confirmation that the person is dead, but it would seem unthinkable if anyone's seen any of the footage of that. But we're sort of back here again, and lighting some candles and singing Kumbaya no longer really cuts it. And I don't say that facetiously or as a cheap jibe, but that always seems to be our response to these things.
We are all rightly appalled by what's happened, but let's not pretend to be surprised. This is the way that we treat Jews in the United Kingdom. We have politicians in this country who have permitted weekly hate marches in many of our cities, including our capital, who are now going to say that they are aghast at what's happened and claim that they can't see any connection between the two. We've had Jews told that they can't go down the street in their own country, in their own capital, because they are visibly Jewish. And when people on those marches have abused them and claimed that it's about their opposition to Zionism, they are shouting at British Jews who vote for British politicians in the British Parliament who have nothing to do with Netanyahu or Israel necessarily, as far as they know, just because they are Jewish. And we've let it happen. So let's not pretend we're surprised.
Very well put. And, you know, there is the phrase, it was kind of only a matter of time before something like this happened, does seem to have a new life to it at the moment. Of course, Our thoughts are with those that are affected, and we know that 2 people have died in this attack. It appears to have been particularly brutal in the way that this was carried out. And as I say, you know, eyewitnesses, and there's lots of video footage, as is the world we live in now, online as well, which appear to show the attacker being shot by police. No full confirmation on whether this person survived that. I would speculate, I hope reasonably, that looks unlikely.
Ian, I want to say something about our brave frontline police officers who put themselves between us and danger and run towards the danger when the rest of us quite sensibly often run away. When I was the candidate in Finchley and Golders Green last year for the Conservative Party, the most Jewish seat in the United Kingdom, when I went to Kinloss Synagogue or to Norris Lee or to Alyth, there were always security people provided at those synagogues. It is terrible that they are needed, but they are admirable in the bravery that they show in being willing to do it. Sometimes police officers who do their job in those settings finely, well, with dignity and respectfully, and sometimes by Shomrim, an organisation that Jewish people have put together to provide themselves security in the absence of enough by the state. And our Prime Minister now saying he's going to do more. I mean, how much can we say the horse has bolted and now you're going to close up the barn?
And it's interesting, you raise a point there. Perhaps many people around the UK are not familiar with what you just said there, the amount of security that happens around not just synagogues but Jewish schools as well. I mean, it's extraordinary that, you know, little kids going to school with barbed wire fences and security.
Spot on. I went to a bat mitzvah very recently in Edgware and Hendon Reform Synagogue, and that community, it's not, and that it's not just the way that people should have to live with that kind of perpetual fear and perpetual security around them, but they do so quite sensibly and quite realistically, as today has tragically shown.
We have reporters on the way to the scene there as well, and of course there will be sadly emerging details throughout the course of the afternoon, and we'll bring it to everybody here first on Talk. Let's look at this story. The other big story of the day, there are many around today. There's never a dull day on the news agenda, it seems, for good or bad. Kemi Badenoch, however, vowing to scrap failed climate change law. She says she's going to give it both barrels, really, in the sense of how she intends to deal with this one. Let's have a reminder of what she'd previously said on the issue of net zero and 2050.
Net zero by 2050 is impossible. I don't say that with pleasure. I want a better future and a better environment for our children, but we have to get real. Anyone who has done any serious analysis knows it cannot be achieved without a significant drop in our living standards, or worse, by bankrupting us.
So she's been consistent in the last year or so on that point, Alex. What is your response to this? As a man who has stood as a Conservative candidate, where do you sit on the whole net zero, almost evangelism, some would call it? What are your thoughts?
There's nothing wrong with wanting to help and improve our environment. Indeed, that's an aim that many on my side of politics share. We want to conserve the environment and protect it. However, when we entered into these kinds of commitments, and you don't need to criticise Ed Miliband for this part, when we started this process, we believed the world was going with us. And instead, we have continued to make life harder for ourselves. Our energy bills are higher because of net zero. Our energy costs to businesses are higher because of net zero. We've made ourselves less competitive because other major countries haven't followed suit. So it's just madness for us to keep doing it to ourselves when we constitute less than 1% of the world's emissions, when we've done the best job in the G20 at reducing what we put out into the atmosphere, and our Chinese friends and in India continue to pollute more and more. We've got to put our faith in technology and gradual improvement over time, and hope that these countries change their minds. It's simply self-harm to go it alone.
Yeah, and there is no one, if you ask the question, do you want a better or a cleaner environment? I mean, the obvious answer to that is yes. What I think people find disagreeable, Alex, is the sort of, I mentioned the word again, that evangelical way that Ed Miliband has decided. I mean, Ed Miliband is absolutely obsessed with this, you know, to the point where somebody, I think, should sort of have a quiet word and maybe suggest he takes some time off. I mean, this seems to just be almost beyond a fascination, beyond a policy. The man's living it daily in some kind of almost bizarre and slightly weird way. That's the point of difference, isn't it? It's the speed you go and what you have to do to get there.
That's right. And it doesn't matter what the policy area is. If someone becomes enough of a zealot in an environment where they have no pun intended, in an environment where they have a closed loop in which they receive lots of positive feedback from special interest groups and other people very enthusiastic about their view, and they simply don't listen to any other criticism or anyone's perspective. If they shut it out, as soon as you disagree, you're some kind of terrible person who doesn't deserve an airing, then they're like a pinball machine on tilt. They will just get worse and worse and worse. And I hope we're at end stage Miliband. I fear actually we're not.
That should always be taught in school. What are you doing in school this week? Well, this term we're studying end-stage Miliband. It's a phenomenon that happens to some politicians. Every 27 years it happens to at least one member of Parliament. And it happens to be Ed at the moment. We'll look at that. Let's come to this, because we've been talking, and I said in the opener of all of this, Alex, about how politics is sort of changing in a way that perhaps we haven't seen in quite such a profound way as we're seeing at the moment, the kind of archetypal templates of political ideology are shifting all over the place. And Labour today have done something, or announced another element of their migration policy. They're planning tougher asylum rules, no automatic settlement or family reunions for refugees, stricter conditions when it comes to work, English skills, national insurance aimed to deter channel migrants and asylum shopping, as they call it. Let's have a listen to Starmer at the Labour conference on this very point.
Mark my words, we will stop this. We will smash the gangs. We will crack down on illegal working. We will remove people with no right to be here, and we will secure Britain's borders.
Well, there it is. He never sounds like he means it when he's on this territory, Alex. This is not really in the DNA of Labour. We've known that, which is why I don't think any of them sound particularly convincing when they talk about immigration.
No, I don't think he particularly believes it, but he's got to do it, both for the pragmatic political reason with which you started this conversation, but also because we are now in competition with our European friends, and they've all tightened up their restrictions. It's harder to get asylum in Germany than it once was, most particularly. But also Austria has become more robust. The French are making it harder. And in the end, if we don't follow suit, you'll make the UK was always an easy touch, but you'll make it the easiest touch. Yeah. So even if he doesn't particularly believe in it, and even if the political pressure wasn't on, which it is, he'd pragmatically have to do this because of our European friends doing precisely the same. The political problem for him is he can't outbid Farage, right? And whatever he says, Farage will have gone further. So he's going to have to convince the country now he's finding the right balance whilst trying to keep his own base, which basically hates all this, with him. Very, very difficult for the Prime Minister. And of course, in the end, whilst I don't support him and I didn't vote for him, he's our Prime Minister and I wish him well. I hope it succeeds.
But of course, it's about trust, isn't it? It's the idea that when you look at Nigel Farage, whether people like him or hate him, you kind of believe that he believes, and you look at the man and go, well, this is something. It's been in his political DNA forever. He's talked about this. He championed Brexit. He joined the European Parliament specifically for this kind of reason to kind of fight from within, I suppose. And he's talked about little else throughout his entire time in high-profile politics. When Starmer talks about this, half an hour ago, he was representing legally half the people that try and get into the country or are being thrown out of the country. And here he is talking as if he's somehow discovered some incredible new way of dealing with immigration. He's going to get very tough. I don't think people really believe it.
No, I don't think his heart's in it. But I also think a lot of people just won't accept the sorts of challenges they're making. Looks a bit desperate to the Farages of this world. Look, I'm a Conservative and I'm not a Reform supporter, but David Davis certainly spoke for me, long-standing MP, who said he was frankly disgusted by the attacks that the Prime Minister and David Lammy, our Deputy Prime Minister, had made against Nigel Farage. I don't think anyone will believe Nigel Farage isn't a patriot, but also it's just such an easy and smearing thing to do, to call someone a racist and say their policies are racist, say they're a snake oil salesman, to say that they flirted with Hitler Youth and so forth. I mean, just smearing people on the most personal way, and it demeans their high offices. And also, I've got to tell you, I just don't think it's going to work.
I think you're bang on. Alex, we stop there, but thank you as ever. Great to have you on. We will speak again very soon. He is Alex Dean, consultant, political commentator, former Conservative candidate for Parliament as well. We'll continue to talk about Manchester too. I do want your calls, by the way, on that question of just to go back to the Conservatives. Can the Tories turn it around? Tomorrow they all descend on Manchester for their big conference. Can they actually, against what anybody would ever think, turn this one around? 0344 499 1000. You drop us a voice note on there as well. We're going to talk to Peter Blexley shortly on what is happening in Manchester, this horrendous news of 2 dead in a Manchester synagogue attack. The latest coming next.
can't attack the policies that we're coming out with because they know that these policies are popular, and in fact they try and ape these policies, as we saw this week with Labour's sort of pale imitation of our position on indefinite leave to remain. So they can't attack the policies, so they attack the people. And by suggesting that reform, that we're racist, that we're Nazi, it's an attempt just to put us out of mainstream respectable political debate altogether. So it's profoundly undemocratic in its purpose.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 minutes after 2 o'clock, Peter Blexley joins us, former Met Police detective. We are, of course, responding, Peter, to this horrendous attack in Manchester. Today is Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, of course. And it appears that somebody chose this day, one would assume very specifically, to carry out what looks like an atrocious... I know details are sketchy at the moment, but an atrocious attack, 2 people dead so far. The person they believe responsible has been shot by police, but they can't actually confirm that the person's dead because nobody can approach the body, as I understand it.
Indeed, because in the images that we've already seen, the person that we're pretty certain was the attacker, this bearded man, has some white packages attached around his waist.
Yeah.
Now, is this a viable explosive device or not? And that's what the police will be trying to establish. So there will be an examination of those packages on that person. We can't confirm they're dead or not because nobody can get close enough to see whether there's a pulse or not. So
because it would be too dangerous for individuals to approach the body as it lays there next to this synagogue.
In case that is a viable device, which could detonate itself, for example, or be on a timer, for example. All these kind of things. So the police are faced with some very, very challenging operational decisions here. They will not want images of the robot doing its examination being beamed around the world from somebody's smartphone, for example. So then that throws up a question, well, do they erect screens? Well, that places the people that erect the screens at potential risk if it's a viable device. So do they clear the street? Well, yes, of course, but if it's a viable device, that carries a risk in evacuating people. Very, very difficult challenges for the police to face.
We are just hearing, literally in the last few seconds, that a loud, controlled explosion has just been heard at the police cordon in Crumpsall. The bomb disposal unit are understood to be at the scene. Now, we don't know the nature of that, whether that is the bomb disposal unit detonating something, which is part of the protocol or the procedure, if you like, of investigating potential explosives.
Yes. Invariably, it's safety first. If there is any shadow of a doubt about a device, then a controlled explosion, of course, is a far better thing to happen than an uncontrolled explosion of a lethal device, possibly.
This comes at a very sensitive time, you know, discussions about free speech and, you know, integration and goodness knows what. There's all manner of narratives. We don't know the motivation. We don't know anything really about the identity of the person other than the suspected attacker appears to be a youngish man, 20s, 30s, with a bald head and beard with, as you say, what looks like something strapped around his waist. That's all we know. The police will be in that very difficult position now where people are saying, you know, we need more information about the suspect. Now, I've never quite known whether that is useful or not. I understand why people ask for it. Does it create a problem? Does it address a problem?
Of course, it's very useful for the police to establish someone's identity.
Indeed.
Because then they can go to their home And of course, that is another huge challenge, because could that home be booby-trapped?
Yeah.
Could there be poisons or other noxious substances or explosive devices all booby-trapped and ready to blast people into eternity? That would be potentially be the motive. We don't know. So this huge operation, which now will have the assistance of the military, counter-terrorism police, although of course it's not been declared a terrorist incident yet.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the motivation of an offender has to be established before it can be declared as that. But it is, in everything but name, this is obviously a terrorist attack.
Indeed. Peter, thank you for your time. Great to have you with us. Peter Blexley with us on the programme, former Met Police detective. Thank you to him. Back to you. We will update you, of course, throughout the course of the afternoon. The nature of that controlled explosion that's just been heard at the police cordon in Crumpsall. More on that story and, of course, the latest on the identity, if we get that far, throughout the course of the afternoon, on the person they believe to be responsible. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Just gone 1:30 right here on Talk. Lots to respond to, of course. We are continuing to bring the breaking and emerging news from Manchester. We know that, and we've just heard that the King said he is shocked and saddened over the Manchester attack. As we know so far, 2 people are dead. The person suspected of being responsible was shot by police. We have at the moment, no confirmation of whether that person is dead. It looks unlikely that they wouldn't be, but there are obvious logistical reasons, bearing in mind this person appeared to have something strapped around his waist, as to why people are not able to go in there and take a pulse and decide or work out what the situation is there. But we know an explosion was heard moments ago. So it's all being put together as we speak, and we'll bring you the latest, and I'm sure the police in Manchester will be giving more information over the course. I would imagine in the next 30 minutes we'll get a little bit more detail. On to other news. As the Tories prepare for their conference in Manchester this weekend, Kemi Badenoch has urged members to hold their nerve as she hits back at Reform UK's defections. She vows to scrap the Climate Change Act, ditch net zero, prioritise growth and, of course, hopefully win the next election. Let's speak to Adam Holloway, former Conservative MP, now a member of Reform. Good afternoon to you, Adam.
Thank you very much for having me, but I hadn't appreciated this was visual, so I'm actually wearing my running kit.
Don't worry.
Your viewers won't be able to see my shorts.
Well, listen, it's good to know that there is a fighting fit politician out there and ready for action. Listen, I mean, did you jump too quickly? Because, you know, Kemi Badenoch is now saying, look, you know, this was unnecessary. We're on it. We've got it all covered. She's going to deal with net zero. This weekend she might leave the ECHR. Who knows what's going to happen? Did you peak too soon, do you think, Adam?
Look, what is a political party? I mean, is it the MPs? Is it the local councillors? Is it the headquarters? Or is it the people who vote for it, who put it into power? And you see, I think what's happened here is the Conservatives, you know, my government, what did we do? You know, we got people to vote us in as Conservative, and then we governed as Labour light. And what you're seeing today, and by the way, I don't know Kemi Badenoch well, but I think she's very able, and she's now saying the right things. Tim Shipman did a very good article in today's Spectator about leaving the ECHR, about net zero. You know, those are they're the right policies, but those are now Reform's policies. Her problem is that, you know, amongst some very good people in the Conservative Parliamentary Party, far too many of them basically would be Lib Dems if the Lib Dems were winning. And, you know, I think it's very difficult for her to bring policies like that through. And these are Reform's policies.
She might argue, actually, they're kind of Conservative policy. Reform have nicked policies from all over the place, not perhaps on net zero, but they've got a few lefty ones in there as well about nationalisation. They've got all sorts of issues. I mean, Labour have probably tried to steal an immigration policy or two. Perhaps we're just in an era now, Adam, where these usual kind of templates of political ideology have all seismically shifted now, where there isn't really a book of a kind of bullet point list of this is Tory, this is Labour, this is Reform. It's all kind of been thrown up in the air.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting observation, actually. All I'd say, though, is that, you know, we were in government for quite a time. Mm-hmm. We didn't get rid of the ECHR, despite the effect it was having, for example, on the boats, despite the effect that it's having on, you know, veterans who served this country, who are now facing prosecutions. You know, we brought in the Climate Change Act, which has been absolutely disastrous, perhaps costing, I think, one quote was £319,000 million over the next 15 years, exporting jobs, exporting our own pollution. The reality is that these are now Reform's policies, reforms of the reform of the people who are actually serious about delivering them. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, the country is in great peril now. You know, we're kind of close to the point of no return. And these are the people who are serious about it. These are the people now with a very small team, but one that is going to grow. And I think these are the people most likely to be able to do something about it, because someone's got to. I mean, the country right now, it's run basically by the student common room from a university. I mean, these people have been a disaster. They've got almost no one who's ever had a proper job. And it's now time for people of goodwill from many different walks of life to get behind Reform, make sure it can recruit those many thousands of people that it's got to recruit and assess and train. It's got to get policies, and it's got to get a plan for government, because, you know, a lot of this stuff will be in the teeth of fierce opposition.
You don't, just in a word, Adam, we are short on time. Do you think you could defect back to the Conservatives?
Look, I'm going to stay with the voters. And, you know, the voters want things like net zero and massive uncontrolled immigration dealt with. You know, one of the things that I really like about Reform is it's colourblind. You know, it just wants to do the right thing for the country.
Adam, lovely to have you on, sir. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt the jogging as well. Adam Holloway, former Conservative MP, now defected to Reform UK. And there we were, chatting about this and defections and changes of allegiance and where our politics are. And by a bizarre coincidence, Matthew Said, the journalist, just happened to walk past the window. I think he just came to get a Virgin Radio mug. And we said, Matthew, quick, come in here. You've written about this. Haven't seen you for ages,
You
Matthew.
know, it has been too long, Ian.
It's been way too long.
It wasn't that much of a coincidence. I was in Birmingham earlier and I got a message. Are we on TV? We are on, I can see myself
We are
on
indeed,
screen.
yes.
But the brilliant producer here,
Finn.
I say brilliant, above average is probably
I think
fairer
you're
description.
really pushing it with that one. That's another
But
story.
he said, look, we would like you to come on the show. And I thought, Ian, I haven't seen you for so long.
I know.
You look younger every time I come in.
Well, you're too kind.
But it's true, it's true. Is it oil, do you remember that? What was it, Oil of Olay?
That's right, yeah. That's exactly what it is. During every news break, I have a wash down, you see. They spray me with that stuff. Listen, your column is unmissable on a weekly basis, but this one really jumped out at me on Sunday in the Sunday Times because I'd never quite knew where your political allegiance was. I always thought that you were probably a Lib Dem, and I think I thought that because one of your best mates is John Cleese, and John is or certainly was a Lib Dem for a long time. So I kind of think I'd married that up. But you did once stand as a Labour candidate.
Well, I mean, this is the interesting thing to me, Ian, that when I was a Labour candidate in 2001, I mean, it's a while ago, but that manifesto was very interesting.
Yeah.
Because at the time, the public debt to GDP...
This is I know what you're about to say. This is fascinating.
It was 30%.
30%
of GDP, which is a sensible place for debt to be, because you don't want to be paying tons of interest, because it eats up the state budget. It could be spent on education and health. Yeah. There was no triple lock. This is a Labour government where pensions were rising with prices. Yeah. No more. Not with earnings and all the rest of it. Okay?
We forget that.
We forget that.
Yeah.
The taxation was lower. The overall tax take was lower, but the highest marginal rate was 40p.
40p.
It's higher now.
Yeah.
So people say Labour was left-wing under Tony Blair. That first term, and I was proud to stand on that manifesto, was miles more right-wing than anything we have seen in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because now debt has gone up and up and up. It's now 100% of GDP. It's swallowing more than the education, just paying interest.
Yeah.
There's a triple lock, which will bankrupt us because it's unaffordable. It's rising faster than our GDP. The highest rate of income tax has gone up. The tax take has gone up. The regulatory burden has got bigger and bigger. The tax code.
Yeah.
All these meddling chancellors with their little they stand up at the dispatch box. We're going to have this tax break for but the complication of the tax code
isn't it the biggest in the world, in the Western world?
20,000 pages.
20,000
It's the biggest
pages
in the world. It's completely unnecessary. But what it tells me, Ian, is that when we think of left and right, Labour's left, the Conservatives were miles to the left of Blair on tax, on government spending, on state interference in people's lives. Most importantly, on immigration.
Yeah.
Immigration, there was more people coming in the Boris wave than pretty much between 1066 and 1950. No one voted for it.
Yeah.
It's beyond all sanity. And it's because, I tell you why I think it happened, is Liz Truss is called right-wing. That energy bailout was over 100 billion. It was envisioned to be bigger than furlough. The furlough, a massive state intervention.
Incredible.
It was needed, but that scale and scope. So what I'm trying to get across to the reader is there's been a shift to the left of an unprecedented kind.
Both Labour and the Tories now.
The Tories were far to the left of anything. But Liz Truss would stand up at the dispatch box and say, what happened in the 1970s when there was an energy crisis? Even left-wing governments in, for example, Germany said, well, we have to wrap up warmer. It's going to be tough for us for a couple of years. We have to pay higher price. What did we do? We just soak the economy with more stimulus, more money,
we just
more
print a load more money.
Yeah, but who pays for it?
Yeah, us.
The future.
Yeah.
The future generations. This is what I think we've got away from. And so what I was saying in that column is, I'm a centrist. I hope a sane, rational, objective observer of British politics. And the only party who's anywhere near where I am at the moment, the Tories were terrible for 14 years. I think the worst of all the post-war administrations. But I'm looking at these. Farage, right-wing, he's a socialist. He wants to take over the commanding heights of the economy.
Now, this is interesting, because that jumped out at me when you said in your column that actually, economically, Reform are to the left of Corbyn and McDonnell.
That manifesto in 2017, I mean, he wants to take over the commanding heights of the economy. With debt at 100% of GDP, Ian, he wants more and more giveaways, like the removing the two-child cap, tax cuts. The IFS has described it as profligate. And that is not, in me, it's not just lacking sanity, it's also very left-wing, not taking account prudently of the future. And so I agree with a lot of what Reform says on illegal and legal immigration. Not all, but a lot of it. I've been arguing for years we need to cut legal migration and we can stop stone dead, it's probably not the right phrase, but illegal immigration by changing the legal framework. We're getting there at last. Why didn't we do this 10 years ago?
So how, in all of this, the headline of your column is, I've joined the Conservatives. No, it's not a joke. Let me explain. Now, a lot of people might go, well, hang on a second. You know, lots of people, we just spoke to Adam Holloway, former Conservative MP. He's legged it over to Reform. Danny Kruger, fairly centrist character, you might say. He's nipped over, still as an MP. He's now Reform, Nadine Dorries and a few others. So what has made you think, actually, no, the Tories are still the best hope?
They're now the best hope. They weren't before.
Have they said anything, though? Anything specific that you think, actually, this could work?
The most important thing is Badenoch is getting serious about simplifying the tax code. Think about how much you have to spend on navigating it. The regulatory state has grown and grown and grown. She's also talked, crucially, about reducing debt. All the others are trying to give more and more away. Do you remember at the last election, Sunak, we'll have a quadruple lock.
Yes, that's right.
Rather than a triple lock. They're always trying to outflank each other to the left.
We just need more locks.
Same happened in America. Kamala Harris said, we're going to give away $1 trillion. Trump, big beautiful bill, $3.5 trillion. The debt to GDP in America is 120%. No one seems to. So what amazes me about Kruger and these other Conservatives going to Reform, have they looked at what Farage has said about the fiscal position? Because it's not Conservative, and it's not free market. It's statism.
It's interesting.
Ian, what fascinating about this column, hopefully I laid it all out, and it's not like there are not manifestos that we can look at to verify what I'm saying. But it seems to me a lot of people are deluded about where the British... People say that the Conservatives were right-wing under Cameron and Johnson and Truss. They were not right-wing by any stretch of the imagination.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is about... the art of a bit of self-reliance seems to have gone out of the window. Is that one way to capture what you're kind of saying?
Well, on the economy, remember after the credit crunch, there was a massive monetary stimulus. It sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Quantitative easing. Effectively printing money to try and rescue the banking system. And we probably needed a bit of it, but it became a habit. And in the pandemic, what happens when you flood the system with cash and you're buying government bonds and you're buying company bonds? It means that the not very efficient companies don't ever get tested. They can rely on this extra money coming in. And it means asset prices, the equities, and so on, go up and up. And who owns those? The super rich.
Of course.
So, yes, it's undermined capitalism's capacity. What capitalism preeminently thrives on is a dynamic competitive system where some companies succeed, others fail. That's part of what it means, natural selection. But because they fail, others come in, and it's dynamical. It creates innovation and growth. But because we've soaked the economy with fiscal stimulus and QE, the vibrancy of capitalism has gummed up. And you're right, capitalism has lost some of its self-relying, self-correcting dynamism.
And the self-correcting thing is, is sort of central to the whole point of capitalism, isn't it? That's how it's meant to roll.
What's amazing is if you look at have you noticed something weird? We have AI and technology, and yet productivity stagnated. Doesn't that seem weird? And yet in the post-war age, economies in Europe and in the United States were growing at a compound rate of 3.5%. And I think part of the reason is when there was a recession, some companies went out, but it cleared the air for others to come in and to drive it forward. The main indices, like the FTSE 100, the NASDAQ, and so on, the big companies just staying longer and longer and longer. No European company, I think in the French top 40, FTSE top 100, very few of them have been created in the last decade. These are old companies that are being sustained by stimulus.
Just a final point then, Matthew. There's 4
Am I
years.
getting a bit
to go.
overexcited on that?
No, this is great
I just
stuff.
had a Pret latte, and I'm a bit hyped up here.
Yeah, they don't.
The viewers are probably thinking, "Well, bring Holloway back on." They couldn't be thinking. I couldn't hear what he was saying. By the way, was he good?
They don't mess around at Pret with a latte. I'm telling you.
Although the Costa is stronger.
It's always. I had one of those this morning. It's always a livener, isn't it?
Do you get Costa?
I do.
So what? Do you, the medium?
Standard latte.
Medium or
no,
small?
I get small.
A small,
yeah.
But they still have 2 shots. That
does it nicely.
I love it.
Puts me right spring in the step.
Yeah, I
Matthew.
love those.
4 years' time, just briefly if we can, there's going to be an election. At the moment, if you look at the polls, you have Reform UK, who are riding so high. Recent YouGov poll put the Tories predicted to get 45 seats. That puts them lower than where the Lib Dems are now. There's a lot of work between now and then.
The politics is very febrile. Things are changing at an extraordinary clip. You saw that the Tories went through all these prime ministers. Starmer had I haven't watched it all, but a good conference speech, I understand. But he will be challenged in 3 years, let alone the next general election. Reform it's not impossible that there would have been a civil war in Reform. We've already seen Habib and Lowe disappear, could be another one. Labour could be in a state of civil war too, if Burnham challenges.
Andy Burnham, yeah.
And I think at that point there may have been a debt crisis. It's not impossible, right? Bond yields are rising.
Yeah.
We're struggling to afford our interest payments. There may be, if the Tories hold their nerve, don't keep changing their leader, don't go for the giveaways. It may well be that the British people think we actually need a fundamental shift in this trajectory of leftward drift back to the... It's not impossible. But I will remain, and if I don't like what the Conservatives say, I'll criticise.
You'll criticise them, and you've always been brilliant at that. Listen, Matthew, great to have you on.
Pleasure, thanks for having me.
Do come back.
Do it again.
Can we get Holloway back in, please?
No, don't have Holloway. We do post Costa. We'll both have a Costa.
Yeah.
Feel like shouting at each other.
Holloway's just been jogging as well.
Is that right? Is that
pitched up in his jogging suit? Yeah.
Good for him.
So yeah, good for him as well. Matthew, great to see you. Thank you. Matthew Saeed with us here on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Can the Conservatives turn it around? There's a question. 10 to 2. This is Talk.
Exactly what he's doing. This is a Prime Minister who's circling the drain, who, according to a poll this week, is the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. Starmer knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box, so he's embarked on the most, I want to say it again, extraordinary, coordinated attacks to incite violence against the man.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
That was a great piece from Matthew Said. I mean, it will divide the room on much of what he said, but he put an argument across very succinctly, and you can take it or leave it. But comments on that. Where does it leave the Conservatives? Can they turn it around? Let's talk on this point to Andrew in Hertfordshire. What have you got for us, Andrew? Afternoon to you.
Afternoon. First up, thoughts and prayers with those poor victims' families and the emergency services dealing with, you know.
Of course.
In relation to the way forward, Badenoch's done the right thing. Time spent on intelligence is never wasted, said Winston Churchill. If she just comes out with clear policies as to what she's going to do, and a good example is the net zero stuff, and leaving the court that holds us hostage, that is the way forward. On the other side, you've got rope-a-dope, as Starmer has just set in place a horrific, mad strategy which can only come from Morgan McSweeney to constantly attack this far-right blob, which actually is everybody in the country other than the Labour Party. So they'll do well. She'll do well if she just stays in a straight line and has policies. This is what we'll do. And the end game will be an election. That is a good strategy. It just takes time. And we all want something immediately, don't we?
That seems to be the case, yeah, and it's going to require a leap of faith. And what Matthew Said was just saying, as you probably heard, Andrew, was, you know, this idea that it's a big giveaway, everything's a big giveaway, a state giveaway, going to give you more, whether it's the triple lock, or the quadruple lock, as Rishi wanted, or whether it's the two-child benefit cap thing, you know, we'll get rid of that, we'll renationalise this, you know, the state will look after you. His point is that the Tories, not just Labour, but the Tories have been doing this for years. And the most radical manifesto in recent time was the Labour one in 2001.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you have to research it back and say, right, we'll draw a line. And a good policy would be, if you've not put anything into the system and you've decided that you can't work, then you get exactly what a migrant would get if they land at Dover, £49.52 a week, because you've not put anything in.
Yeah.
Everyone would vote for that.
Everybody would vote for it. Listen, great call. As ever, Andrew, thank you. Andrew in Hertfordshire, starting us off. Let's get a word from Ian down in London. I know you want to talk about Manchester, Ian, and we're still obviously getting our head around these horrendous events. What are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Ian, as you know from other conversations we've had, that I am Jewish and I'm absolutely horrified of what's gone on, but we all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
The saddest thing, last night in London, there was a mass demonstration by pro-Palestinians with fireworks and everything, celebrating and everything else out near enough outside synagogues. So again, it's proven. But what did the Met do? Nothing. But what makes me even more sick this morning, and your guest earlier on, Alex Dean, hit the nail on the head straight away. He did it before I could get on. He said, isn't it amazing that Burgeon, Sultana, Torbay, they're already giving out the messages of, like, sympathy even before it even come out, as if they knew what had happened. They're already giving out messages on tweets, like within seconds.
Do you
and
think
they were all exactly the same as if they were written in Labour headquarters?
Well, that certainly wouldn't surprise me. What do you? I mean, a lot of people online are saying, look, you know, if you start to recognise Palestine or Hamas, essentially, which is, you know, a medieval death cult, and all that goes with it, you allow people to march through the streets saying nefarious and horrible anti-Semitic things. You allow that to all happen. At some point, somebody acts on it. Is there anything in that for you?
Absolutely. And you just hit the nail on the head. Again, because you said the word anti-Semitic, not anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic. because all of this is anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Zionistic or anti-Zion. Mixed up.
It's just a basic Jew hatred, isn't it? I mean, that's what we're dealing with here.
Absolutely. It's got nothing to do. It's just all come out, and it's just showing that the contingency is here, and they're just grabbing on the sort of bandwagon. Indeed. They're just sort of going out now, and it's terrible. And the majority in this country are not like that.
100%, yeah. The majority, in this country of whatever kin background, whatever, we're all pretty reasonable, ordinary people who just want to get on with our lives. But of course, there are certain elements in all different groups. I get it. It's not just one type of group, and those elements sometimes just need somebody to fan the flames a little bit. Ian, thank you very much, and really happy to take your call. I said happy, maybe the wrong misplaced word, but I think you take my point. Thank you to Ian in London. And of course, we will naturally be right across any additional details we get from Manchester. We know that 2 people have died. Keir Starmer says he's appalled. Messages of support and sympathy from the King as well. But where does this leave? There's a wider story here, and it's bubbling away. We don't know full identity of the person that was shot by police, even if he's dead. I think the smart money says he probably is, but that can't be confirmed. We're live in Manchester later. Details on the way. Let's get the news headlines now at 2 o'clock.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of Common Sense, 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. We are, of course, naturally reporting and bringing you the latest detail from Manchester. You know, 2 people have died following an attack on the Heaton Park Synagogue in North Manchester. 3 others serious condition is, as far as we know so far. The suspect was shot by police, believed to be dead, but that is not yet confirmed. Bomb disposal units investigating suspicious items that were found on the person. So we'll bring you the latest. We will hopefully cross later to Manchester as well and get more detail as it comes to us. Also this afternoon, interesting first hour talking about the Tories. The Tories conferences this weekend. It's all happening for Kemi Badenoch, apparently. She's going to ditch net zero, repeal the Climate Change Act 2008, scrapping those targets and prioritising economic growth. Now, serious question. Can the Conservatives turn it around? Half an hour ago seemed unthinkable. Today, is it possible? A lot can happen in the next 4 years. Can she do it? And Labour's plans to tighten asylum rules, ending automatic settlement rights and family unions for refugees. Big, big story here today in The Sun on this one. We'll get some detail from Jack Elson, political editor, who's written a fabulous piece on this. Really interesting stuff. We'll bring you the latest. This apparently is Labour getting on top of the crisis. Not reform. It sounds a bit reformy. It's Labour, so it's kind and caring, whereas reform is just mad and racist. Yeah, you get the way this thing works now. 0344 499 1000. Just a couple of notes on politics here. One here doesn't say who it's from. Public sector gold-plated pensions are destroying Britain from within, including the NHS. He failed to mention, I think this texter is talking about Matthew Said, mentioned it whilst talking about pensions, or was it Starmer? But heard a lot about triple locks, etc. One here from S, who says Tories and Labour Party have had their day. Hopefully the British public will give reform a chance to run the country and get a grip. We will see. So let's move then to this story. It's an interesting, I wouldn't say just intervention, it's been brewing for a few days, and there was an announcement at conference, of course, Labour planning tougher asylum rules. They will include things like no automatic settlement or family reunions for refugees, stricter conditions when it comes to work, English skills, national insurance aiming to deter channel crossings. Starmer's deal with France to return migrants has floundered, it seems, but new measures promise hubs and action against smuggling gangs. Let's get a word. Jack Elson, political editor at The Sun. Great to have you on with us, Jack. Great piece today. Big double spreader in The Sun on this very issue. Starmer's getting serious all of a sudden. Would that be fair?
Yes, I think so. I think Keir Starmer knows that his chances of re-election in 2029 lives or dies with tackling illegal migration. It is the number one issue now of voters. It is seeing reform charge up the polls to open up a pretty commanding lead. And it is incredibly visible, whether that is the sight of boats coming across the channel every day or hotels still permeating through communities. And so Keir Starmer, incredibly tough language. And I think that we are now moving really into the phase where they know they're going to have to come up with some sort of viable deterrent. They've previously talked about gangs. They've talked about deportations. Now I think they know that after scrapping Rwanda on day one, sort of a political ploy, with not much substance to it in terms of what they said, they know they need some sort of deterrent now. And so that is going to include tougher conditions on people coming here. It's going to try and squeeze the benefit system. It's going to potentially involve returns hubs in other countries. And one thing which we're talking about in The Sun today is accommodation, because one of the main pull factors is pretty comfy hotels and houses. And there is a push now from ministers inside government to say, not only do we want something which is cheaper and something which is also much less comfortable. And so whether that is army-style barracks in big plots of government land is something which they are now looking at.
This is going to be difficult for Starmer, of course, isn't it? Because there's a big old pie chart of what makes up a political party, the left, the right, somewhere in the middle, a mixture of all of the above, etc. There's a lot of left-wing MPs on those backbenches that will be apoplectic at the mere idea. The word camps is the thing that discombobulates a lot of those members, plus various other elements that they will claim breaches people's human rights. It's not going to be easy from within for Keir Starmer.
No, the only thing I would say to that is if it's good enough for soldiers, it's probably going to be good enough for migrants.
I think we would all agree with that.
We expect our soldiers to stay in these sort of barracks and they're on the front line. Then I think that some migrants who claim they're fleeing war zones probably can put up with that. But you're totally right there. Keir Starmer is petrified of large parts of his party. This is a major policy announcement which would resonate with much of the country. So why did he not use the platform in the conference hall in Liverpool to say these things? And we know the reason why, because the reception in the hall amongst a pretty liberal, wet Labour membership would have been awful. And so that's why we saw Keir Starmer riffing on all of his liberal natural instincts and not really giving the Labour Party the home truths they need to hear. He did a bit of it, to his credit, and he said that there's nothing compassionate about letting people come across the channel and risk their lives. But when it comes to tough, sensible policies, which most people in this country want to hear, he saved that for after the Labour tribe left Liverpool. And so he's trying to straddle two horses here. He's trying to, one, placate his party, who can be in pretty mutinous mood when they see the polls being so dismal, but also he knows that to turn those polls around, he has to speak to the wider country, and that is getting tough on illegal migration. Indeed.
One of the problems, I suppose, he faces from the wider country is whether people believe him, Jack. I keep repeating this same phrase. It's not naturally, this area of policy is not naturally in Labour's DNA. It's not the thing that fires them up in the morning, not ordinarily on their radar like it would have been previously with the Conservatives, and certainly with Reform UK. So there is a bit of a credibility factor here for Keir Starmer. He can say it, but if people don't believe that he really believes it, then it falls on deaf ears, really.
You're totally right, Ian. Immigration is not comfortable turf for Labour whatsoever. They'd much rather be talking about something like workers' rights or public services or the NHS, things which are in Labour's wheelhouse. Immigration really isn't, because it doesn't really chime with much of their membership, who are pretty liberal on these sorts of things. And so you're right when to say that. I do think it is, it's interesting with what Keir Starmer is really trying to do with this policy, because he knows that he has to speak to a wider country, and that's often the issue of party members. But you know what, like some of Tony Blair's biggest, I think, successes were when he told Labour members uncomfortable truths, whether that was about Clause 4, when he stood there in that hall and said that they'd have to get away from public ownership and socialism if they wanted to win. And I think Keir Starmer almost missed an opportunity to do that in the hall in Liverpool. And so I think that Keir Starmer is a man who I wouldn't say has much of a political philosophy, but to his credit, he does want to try and win. And he knows that he really has to sort of sort this immigration problem out if he's going to stand any hope of winning the next election.
100%. Listen, Jack, thank you as ever. Jack Elsom is the political editor of The Sun. Thank you to him. A lot of this whole conversation about immigration and what can be done surrounds the European Convention of Human Rights, of course. That's a constant in this debate. You can't do anything until XYZ happens. Pull out of it, rewrite it. People have varying ideas on this thing. We see chicken nugget stories. We see all sorts of reasons and excuses that all come under the banner, or the defence is given as in part because of the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, the Policy Exchange has published a new report on the future of this law. Joining us now is Richard Eakins, KC, Head of Policy Exchange's Judicial Power Project. Richard, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
If my history serves me correctly, we're just shy of a month away from the 75th anniversary of the European Convention of Human Rights. I know you're going to tell me I've got that horrendously wrong, but it's in that ballpark, right?
Yeah, it's the 25th anniversary today of the Human Rights Act coming into force.
OK. And in terms of laws, which, as you know as a lawyer, laws are kind of fluid. They move around. There's a labyrinthine world of law that, means that it responds to things, it reacts to things, new precedents are set, etc. But the ECHR seems to be the sort of physics impenetrable thing that just sort of sits there and nothing can ever get beyond it. No one can modify it. If you touch it, you'll turn to stone. Goodness knows what else. That's sort of how we look at this curious part of European legislation.
It's funny, in a way I look at it and see something that is quite changeable, although often in very bad ways. So, in fact, if you read the convention, it doesn't say anything about migration or asylum. And beginning in the 1970s, the Strasbourg Court, the European Court of Human Rights, really did start to expand and remake the convention over time, trying to update it as it saw it, to improve it as it saw it. Again, but the problem with that was it was really adding to the convention things that the member states had never agreed.
Yeah.
So it has developed quite significantly over time, but in ways that really the member states shouldn't put up with and shouldn't have put up with.
Yeah, and of course the line that always comes out is, hang on a second, Churchill was, one of the authors of this thing, for goodness sake. If it's good enough for Winston, then it's good enough for us now. And, obviously there's some truth in that, but, you take the
Not
point.
much.
Well, I was about to say, it's not as if, he sat there in Downing Street with a big old quill and wrote this thing. It didn't happen like that, but...
Well, he wasn't in government. He wasn't in government when we joined. It was Clement Attlee who was Prime Minister.
So we should blame Clement Attlee then in that respect.
Well, to be fair to Clement Attlee and his colleagues, they were reluctant to join the ECHR. They had some idea that it was out of step with our constitutional tradition and a bit dangerous.
Yeah.
But they also didn't foresee what the court would later do, which really is to expand it beyond recognition. I think they would be horrified by what they saw. And Policy Exchange published a report about a month ago, or 2 months maybe now, precisely on that point, attacking that myth that this somehow is Churchill's baby, and if we reform it or if we leave it, somehow we're dishonouring the great man's memory.
And whether we look at Churchill, whether we look at Attlee, the point that I suppose the spirit of the point that is made is essentially what was written back then can't always apply to today, and as you rightly say, doesn't mention immigration as such. But it's certainly, there's no doubt that it is a law that is being lent on as a mechanism of defence for this area of migration.
Oh, sure. No, it's definitely an enormous practical problem that's arisen. In a way, I'd say it's not the fault, again, of Churchill or Attlee or anyone involved in making the convention in 1950. I mean, there are some important human rights that shouldn't be violated, but human rights law has developed in ways that really are way out of step with what human rights properly are or how they should be understood. And human rights law, as it has been developed, has been turned into a means of blocking all manner of government policies or decisions by Parliament in ways that sovereign states should be pretty worried about, really.
Yeah.
So we could parliamentary democracy likewise.
So Richard, it can be changed. I mean, even if.
Sure.
So some people say, well, just get rid of it and, pretty much all the good bits we'll just simulate and bring into domestic law. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Nobody is suggesting we have no human rights. But the idea that it's a 75-year-old ruling or convention that needs to be adhered to is just not really fit for purpose in the 21st century. Is that fair?
Well, as it's been remade by the Strasbourg court, there are serious problems with it. Yeah. And it's perfectly respectable, as you say, to think, well, it's not working, we should withdraw and we'll do our own thing. And we protected human rights perfectly adequately before we joined the convention, before the convention really became sort of a significant part of our daily life, before the Human Rights Act came into force.
Yeah. And all the other countries around the world, of course, that have their own human rights that aren't connected to this in any shape or form.
Sure. Coming from New Zealand,
well, I was about to say, you would. I don't think New Zealand rely on this convention.
No, indeed. It's still a nice country to live in, notwithstanding. So it's a lot of absurd claims are made here that somehow if we were to leave the convention, we'd be in company with Russia or Belarus. I think that's just preposterous, really.
Yeah. So if Kemi Badenoch stands up in the next couple of days, and there's some smart money that says she might do this, says we will leave the convention, obviously all hell will break loose, and there'll be many Conservatives as well as other people who say, you can't do that, you're leaving us open to all sorts of horrors that will be unleashed on individuals and humans, and we'll melt at the mere idea that we are no longer protected by this almost century-old ruling. That's nonsense. She could do it, and she could do it with relative ease, without even allowing for the fact there'll be controversy.
Well, there will be controversy, as you say, of course. No, she certainly could do it if she were in a position to lead the next government. And it'd be a good case for so doing. Our paper, which we published today, really does entertain the options that there are, of which the most comprehensive and most direct, and thus probably the most effective, is to withdraw from the convention. And the thought that somehow that's a sort of a disreputable option is I think, just not true. And there are some points that if she does make that policy announcement, that she, like anyone else taking that position, does need to think about and to have answers for. And we, in our paper, entertain the various objections likely to be made. We've touched on one already, the sort of the suggestion you'll be in company with Belarus or Russia, ridiculous argument. Arguments about Northern Ireland and Good Friday are more serious. We published a paper a month ago, though, Policy Exchange, that answered those objections, I think, pretty comprehensively. Mm-hmm. But it's any government that intends to to withdraw does need to have thought this through carefully.
Yeah.
But the answers are there. They just need to make sure they can present it intelligently and not assume somehow that if we were to leave the convention, we'd be giving up on the idea of human rights protection.
100%. Richard, great to have you on. Very thoroughly put to us as well. Thank you, sir. Richard Eakins, KC. He's head of the Policy Exchange's Judicial Power Project. It was their new research that looked into this. They published a report today on the future of the human rights law reform. Thank you to him. Breaking news, Greater Manchester Police have now confirmed that the suspect in the Manchester synagogue attack is dead after being shot by armed police officers. It was all but obvious that was the case, but just couldn't, for logistical reasons, be fully confirmed. So the suspect is dead. We know that much. More detail to come, I'm sure. We'll get the latest on this in a few moments too. 0344 499 1000.
Just about 2 weeks ago, the authorities slashed the size of Nigel's security detail by 75%. Thankfully, donors stepped in and have shored up that security, so Nigel is well protected. But the Prime Minister knows exactly what he's doing. This is a Prime Minister who's circling the drain, who, according to a poll this week, is the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. Starmer knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box, so he's embarked on the most, I want to say it again, extraordinary, coordinated attacks to incite violence against the man.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes after 2 o'clock. The latest from Manchester is that 2 people have died after a car and a stabbing attack at a synagogue in the area. A third person, thought to be the subject, is now confirmed to be dead after being shot by police. Speculation is rife as to what is behind this. Let's get a word for Dr. Paul Stott, Head of Security and Extremism at the Policy Exchange. Paul, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Naturally, I mean, look, there is a school of thought. I know you have to be careful with journalism, saying things before it's fully confirmed. Social media has a PhD in doing that. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it gets it horribly wrong, as we well know. But this does kind of look like a terror attack. Is that reasonable?
Yes, I think we can say it's extremely likely to be a terrorist attack. Unfortunately, today was a Jewish holy day, Yom Kippur, and Jews were at a synagogue in Manchester. Man appears to have driven a vehicle at people as they were outside the synagogue and then run to the premises. People have been stabbed. I think he's, if we see the video that's been, one of the videos that's been circulating, seems to suggest he was shut out very bravely by the security at the synagogue, who've acted very properly. And the police are there within a few minutes, and he refuses to obey the instructions of armed police officers, and he's fiddling around with something around his midriff. The witnesses were saying was some form of either vest, bomb, or a sort of mock device. We don't know which, and he's then shot by the police.
Is it, as far as, is it common practice? I mean, people will arm themselves up. They may do things to look more threatening. Many a time has somebody been wearing something to look like a device, but it turns out not to be. I guess that may be the possibility. Not a risk, of course, the police can take in circumstances such as that. But is that a sort of mode of attack, the intimidation of looking as if you're going to do more damage than you actually could?
Yes, it's obviously designed, at least in part, to deter any bystanders or others from coming too close. But it's something we've seen in past terrorist attacks, both overseas and in this country. If you think back to the London Bridge terrorist attack, 2017, and also the Fishmongers Hall attack. And indeed, I think in at least one incident in prison, people have worn these types of mock suicide vests in order to intimidate and in order potentially to convince people that they actually have a viable explosive device, not to get too close to them. So I'm afraid it is something we've seen previously.
Yeah, and in terms of what happened here today, we know that 2 people are dead. I think the assumption at the moment is this would have been perhaps from being hit by a car, but there could be, it may well be that somebody was stabbed. We're not absolutely sure of that detail. It is a little sketchy. But there are also 3 people who are in a very serious condition as well. So this story is sadly not over.
No, so the authorities will no doubt divulge more in the next few hours. But it's the most serious incident in terms of terrorism that we've had for some time, and very grim, very grim.
And the usual, I suppose there is a protocol here, that the police have been criticised in the past for not releasing enough information. I've never quite worked out, what is the, is there a kind of a default obvious way to respond to these things? People want information. They want to know about the attacker. They want to know who that person was, who they might have represented, their ethnic background, etc. And there's been obvious controversy in very recent past on this. Does that serve a purpose in any respect? I mean, I can understand the appetite for it, but does it help or does it hinder?
Well, I think it can potentially hinder because, of course, the police have got a live investigation ongoing now, and that's going to be their first priority. That there may well be others to focus on in the Greater Manchester area, and that will be, as well as reassuring the community, their priority. So there's going to be social media speculation, as we've seen with past incidents. Sometimes that speculation proves to be accurate, other times it proves to be wrong. And indeed, we saw an example of that, if you remember, with the incident in Liverpool after the football parade.
Yeah, indeed. Paul, thank you, sir. Great to have you on with us. Informative stuff from Dr. Paul Stott. He's head of security and extremism at the Policy Exchange. Thanking him. Let's get a call on this. Matt is in Cheshire, clearly not a million miles away. Matt, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. And obviously horrific, and I'm not even going to mention thoughts and prayers because I think it's so condescending, but my support is fully behind the Jewish community and always will be. I've just received a text for someone just about 3 seconds ago saying somebody who goes on hotel protests, saying that they were organising a march to pro-Palestine in central Manchester at 5:30 today.
They were organising a pro-Palestine march?
The pro-Palestine lot, i.e. the Socialist Workers' Party, are perhaps organising a march for today. If Andy Burnham allows that, then that tells you everything you need to know about Andy Burnham.
Of course, but I think it would be also reasonable to say, Matt, that these are the kind of stories that, develop on social media.
Of course,
and we can't always corroborate them. And it's the kind of thing I can imagine somebody saying in the wake of this.
That isn't true.
Yeah. But we will see. But if anyone was even planning something like that, then, water cannons should be out in force. I mean, goodness me.
Well, my original point was, anybody that knows anything about Manchester Council and what it's become in the centre in the last year, especially since October the 7th, knows that the council, the Labour Council, embolden and more or less encourage Islamists and anti-Semites to freely share their views in the middle of.
Well, they love it. They work on the basis that Israel is the perpetual enemy, despite the fact that it's an ally and has been forever, and it's akin in terms of values and the like to the Western world. Whereas just across the land there, in Gaza, you have a medieval death cult and people who support that death cult. The very antitheses of everything we stand for, and for some bizarre reason, I've never really been able to work it out, Matt. That appears to be an area that people on the left are more comfortable gravitating towards. I can't fathom it for love nor money, never have been able to.
On that basis, we can take Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham's vacuous platitudes as totally fake and disingenuous. They embolden people to be like this. They allow these horrific people. But let's face it, if there were 10,000 white men in the middle of Manchester with skinheads marching up and down, threatening people, they would be gone within minutes. The police would attack them. Like you say, there would be water cannons. But because it's Muslims, because it's pro-Palestine, because it's anti-Jewish, it's almost like, this adds to the colour of the city centre.
It kind of gets, and even notwithstanding my, absolute evangelical relationship with free speech and protest, I get that. But there is a bit of me that is, supremely uncomfortable with some of those marches and some of the things that were written on signs and things that people were saying. But also, let's not forget the root of it all, the idea that we're in a country where people are perfectly relaxed about propping up I know they say it's not about Hamas, it's about the Palestinian people. I have some sympathy, obviously, I think most people do, with that element of the argument. I'm not absolutely convinced that is the central part of their argument. And when you have Hamas essentially thanking the British Prime Minister for recognition, you realise where we're at. And I can't separate those two events from the kind of things we've seen and perhaps linked in some respect to what we saw today. We will wait and see. Matt, great words from you as ever. Thank you, Matt in Cheshire. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls and comments on the way. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000, 25 to 3, and we are just hearing that counter-terrorism police are expected to make a statement within the hour on the incident at the synagogue in Manchester. We'll bring you that when it happens. Now, PPE MedPro must repay £122 million after supplying faulty COVID gowns to the NHS. It was one thing getting the deal, but they weren't even right. Faulty COVID gowns. Mrs Michelle Mone denying any wrongdoing, but admitted lying about her involvement. Labour's Rachel Reeves vows recovered funds will go to schools, the NHS and communities. I mean, good luck getting all of that back, as they say. Insisting that Mone has no place in the House of Lords. Let's get a word from Daniel Bruce, Chief Executive of Transparency International UK. Daniel, good to see you.
Afternoon, Ian.
I mean, this is this story doesn't sit in isolation, of course, but I mean, this is the one that we are sort of here really to discuss. Somebody said to me, let's just go back to the COVID thing. I spoke to somebody reasonably kind of senior within government circles who said, there was all these stories about, giving contracts to their mates, etc. And someone went, no, it wasn't that. This is just blind panic and headless chickens. They gave contracts to people they'd heard of. It was almost as crude as that, which is almost as bad as giving it to your mates. They're just like, yeah, she's worth a few quid. He's got a load of money. He's got a good idea. Let's get the contract sent out. Does that, just on that point alone, does that resonate a bit?
Yeah, I mean, both of those things are true. There was panic, and officials and ministers have been very clear ever since that, there was a real, genuine concern that at the beginning of the pandemic, the country was going to run out of PPE, and then there was this call to arms for anyone who could help send their stuff in. The government quickly became overwhelmed, and that's when that notorious VIP lane got set up. And the thing with the VIP lane was that the qualifying criteria to be in it was that you'd been referred in by a high-ranking politician or official, rather than, for example, having a track record in being able to supply high-quality PPE, and that's how PPE MedPro got their contract.
So whether you were Matt Hancock's landlord or whether you were somebody who'd made a lot of money out of making bras, you could have found yourself in that VIP lane. I mean, one former minister did say to me, this idea that we know all of these millionaires, he said, the richest person I know is the fellow that owns the off licence in Bridlington. He said, I don't know any rich people, but I do know lots of people who have contacts. So he was making the point, they weren't mates, they were just people that we thought, wow, they must be good. They're worth a few quid. They've built an international empire. And is that how Michelle Mone ended up in the fast lane? In fact, she was almost in a fast lane.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence shows that you had to have the email address or the phone number of a minister or high-ranking official to get in that fast lane. And if you were in it, you were 10 times more likely to get a contract to produce PPE. And all of the usual sort of risk factors around preventing corruption of public money, preventing taxpayer waste were kind of thrown out the window, which is why, for example, you ended up with many, many companies like MedPro who'd never done this before. They got their £122 million contract within days of being formed as a company. And it was Michelle Mone herself who referred the company into the VIP lane, which was something she denied for a number of years and only admitted to do it rather later.
I mean, it's rather extraordinary, because just from another perspective here, before we get into the sort of nuts and bolts of what's happening with her, can you imagine, bearing in mind there's an international pandemic going on, we are told, certainly in the early stages, we could all die if we get this thing, and it's snaking its way around the world, killing people left, right and centre. And we need some protection. Can you imagine putting yourself forward as an expert in medical equipment when you have zero qualifications in medical equipment?
Yeah, and I guess it's for the individuals who did that to explain why they felt
of all
that
the things you might risk. You might say, I could get a security team up to look after the O2 if there's a big gig on or something. But making stuff that is about protecting people's lives, I mean, that's you've got to have some kind of uber self-belief to think you could do it.
Yeah, I mean, there were quite a few people in the VIP lane who had good supply chain connections. They knew people who made this kind of stuff in China and what have you. But what the government's approach at the time did was freeze out the companies who knew what they were doing. For example, there was a firm who developed much expertise with PPE, sending stuff out to West Africa during the Ebola crisis. Very established company. No one was picking up their phones in government because they weren't in the VIP lane because they didn't have the right contracts. And the result of all of this is this colossal amount of waste. The £122 million of MedPro is the tip of the iceberg. £1 billion of stock that went through that VIP lane was written off as unfit for use in the NHS.
Which is unbelievable. You'd think at the very least, I know that there was an urgency around this, which is arguably why, lots of I's and T's were not dotted and crossed. That really does understate it as well, doesn't it? But so yes, allowing for the urgency, you would still think that there would be some kind of basic checks and balance. If you're handing out 122 million quid several times in different areas and that kind of money, even allowing for the urgency, you'd thought there must be a room in government, in a civil service somewhere, called the big spending check and balance room, where somebody looks at it and goes, well, we need to firstly find out, are they fit? Can they do this? What is their connection? Have they got a history in this? Something. It appears from the outside, Daniel, that there was nothing. Almost nothing.
Almost nothing is a fair description. Essentially, the rule book, all international best practice for how you do good public spending, including in a major crisis, was thrown out the window by the UK government. We, in our analysis, couldn't find any other country in the world that created something like the VIP lane. And it wasn't just those early weeks of panic. This went on for months. It went on for years, well into the summer of 2020 and beyond. And in the end, the cost to the public purse is at least £14 billion of wasted spend, and then the money that we've been paying for years to store all of this stuff while it's in litigation.
So Michelle Mone, I would imagine, I can't speak for her, but I would guess, somebody who'd worked in production, who knew what a supply chain looked like. I'm sure she's got a lot of skills in supply chains, thinking, well, I used to make bras, if I can make bras, I can make face masks or whatever, I don't know. But I certainly know how to get stuff. But even the stuff that was procured was not up to scratch. I mean, that's a whole other level of of question there. Getting it is one thing. If you got it and said, okay, oh, this is amazing, you've got the best face mask ever, well done, Michelle, but they were rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, what the court determined yesterday was that PPE MedPro could not prove that the gowns they supplied had been properly sterilised, and that I saw was disputed by Baroness Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman in their response to the finding yesterday, and they've suggested that they're a scapegoat for this whole affair. Those two things can exist as truths beside one another. True. It can be true that those gowns were not demonstrated to be properly sterilised, and it can also be true that there are many, many, many other cases like this that warrant equal attention.
What is reasonable, though, is that essentially the taxpayer asked for their money back, and that's what's going on now.
Yeah, I mean, in our analysis last year, when we looked at the whole 5,000 of contracts, we identified £15 billion worth of spend that sort of had three or more high-risk flags for possible corruption of public money, and that includes the sort of direct awarding of contracts, referrals by political associates, and so on, and that number correlates pretty strongly with the amount that's been written off. I think, frankly, based upon my understanding of the situation, we're not going to see 15 or £14 billion back. PPE MedPro, again, as a case study, went into administration on Tuesday. My understanding is that it had around £600,000 on its balance sheet prior to that, which is a long way from that 122 million. And I know of other companies, and they're already in the public domain, where they got 50, 70 million pound contracts. They've gone bust. They were registered to overseas shell companies, and there's nothing there to be found. So it's a very difficult process. That's not to say that I don't think the government can't get anything back, but I think we're talking in the hundreds of millions rather than billions.
And of course, if companies go bust, bankrupt, whatever term, then there's not a lot you can necessarily do. I mean, if you're talking about a criminal offence, then obviously the police can look at assets of individuals and stuff, but that's not really what's going on here.
Not for breach of contract, no. I mean, as you said, there are some circumstances where individual directors could be held accountable through other vehicles, but it's very difficult. And I think there's a trade-off here. At the beginning of 2023, government was spending £700,000 a day storing defective PPE at the taxpayer's expense. So the longer these litigations go on, the greater that cost becomes as well. And there's perhaps a point, and I hope with this case it might actually act as some leverage where there's still litigation going on, say, come on, actually, the better thing to do would be to settle out of court, give some money back to the government and get rid of all this unusable stock once and for all.
Did any of this, there's a lot of people, a lot of very senior people between contractor and Secretary of State or Prime Minister, but when any of this got to, did somebody knock on Matt Hancock's door? And it's easy to forget Matt Hancock ever existed, isn't it, as a person? He's a curious character, but he's no longer an MP, and of course, and he now does other things like go to the jungle. But Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, any of these people, did anybody say, look, we've got a real problem here. This is going to come back and bite somebody on the butt at some point, because there's a lot of kit, much of it can't be used, and we have spent hundreds, we've spent billions.
So where you see that concern being expressed was among some senior civil servants. If you trawl over the emails that the COVID inquiry's got in front of it, for example, you can see real concern among officials who are saying this VIP lane system is actually taking up far too much time. We are very concerned at the amount of time we are having to spend appeasing these political connections rather than talking to credible suppliers of PPE. The politicians, there are email trails with Michael Gove's email address on it, with Matt Hancock's email and his office and his advisors, where you can see this referral process going on. And people that they knew, or people that, one or two steps removed, emailing directly into these very senior members of the government at the time and then passing this into this VIP lane. The government at the time has always furiously denied that proper due diligence wasn't then applied to these contracts, but the problem was they created a system that put these less reputable suppliers at the front of the queue in the first place.
We were having a conversation yesterday, Daniel, in the office about people who kind of rise well above their abilities, and government and tentacles of government, organisations are full of these people. We were talking, in fact, Paula Venables, the woman that ran the post office, who has kind of spent her professional life on boards and running stuff without anybody stopping to go, is she actually any good? And it turns out with the post office there were some big question marks over her opinion. She seemed to be, she was a bit quirky. At a time they needed more females in the boardroom. She was a vicar, for goodness sake. What could go wrong? Well, she didn't really know what she was doing. That's what went wrong. So I think there's lots of people in public life that are just kind of dying out on this weird perception that people around them feed into. Somebody like Michelle Mone, you can only imagine the meeting going, well, Mone, she'll be brilliant. She knows her stuff. She's a multi-millionaire. She knows about supply chains. What could go wrong? You can almost hear that conversation.
And that's why kind of rule 101 of how you spend public money is that you don't actually put politicians in charge.
100%. Never give them the checkbook
to the front of the queue. That's why we're supposed to have checks and balances in place. Yes, we needed emergency procurement legislation during the height of the pandemic, but as I've said, that went on forever. We haven't fully learnt the lessons of all of this as well, though. The Labour in opposition said that they would outlaw things like the VIP lane approach for emergency procurement. They haven't done that in government, and it's still quite possible that any government of any complexion could make the same mistakes again, and that really concerns us.
Yeah, rightly. So, well, again, that feeds into what I was just saying, doesn't it? Each government always says we're going to have a bonfire of the quangos. They love that phrase, and they do get rid of the quangos, but then they just replace them with new quangos that they don't call quangos, that have a different set of people who are more sympathetic to them as a government. So we always end up with this sort of ever-expanding bureaucracy, whether it might be in the civil service, but those areas which are actually more interesting than the civil service, where contracts are given, and that's kind of where we are now.
And one of the interesting things about 2020 was that the UK was very analogue in the way that it kept records of the way that it spends public money, and there have been some improvements, and what we see in other countries and their response to the COVID crisis was where you've got more modern, nimble, cheaper systems with good data that tells you what's going on in the market and where you can buy decent stuff. They had a much better experience of their pandemic procurement. So again, in fairness, we've had a little bit of progress under both the former Conservative and Labour government since then, but not enough. These things don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be bureaucracy. They just have to function well and draw on technology and data.
Not to make light of anything, but I guess the moral of the story is never give a multi-million-pound medical contract to someone who makes knickers.
or somebody
I think that's fair,
who maybe hasn't done it before, whatever they happen to be intimating.
Indeed, there we are. Daniel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel Bruce with us on the programme, Chief Executive of Transparency International UK. Thank you to him. Back to you in a couple of moments. This is Talk.
They can't attack the policies that we're coming out with because they know that these policies are popular. And in fact, they try and ape these policies, as we saw this week with Labour's sort of pale imitation of our position on indefinite leave to remain. So they can't attack the policies, so they attack the people. And by suggesting that reform, that we're racist, that we're Nazi, it's an attempt just to put us out of mainstream, respectable political debate altogether. So it's profoundly undemocratic in its purpose.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll take a call from David in just a second on that issue of COVID waste. Just some comments coming through from you on this. Andy in Thatcham, on the PPE MedPro story, there's clearly no question they owe the taxpayer money, but who signed off the order when it was received if it was faulty? This action would have actioned the payment for that order. This could have been stopped at that stage. Why was it not? I honestly think, and I have no evidence for this, but just looking at, if you look back over the years of how much money on computer systems is another one. There was John Prescott in obviously in the 90s. I think he started I think it was to do with the fire service, some kind of computer system that was going to almost recalibrate the way the fire service was run. Then there was a sort of famous NHS system as well. And contracts are just handed out. Look how, you know, the Sercos and the Capitas of this world, they're just sort of given out to people because we know who they are and we can't think of anyone else who could provide. On paper, you could kind of see with the Michel Mon thing, you could sort of see why someone might say, look, it's unconventional, but this is somebody who knows the supply chain, works with physical material, can get things made and quickly. So for a superficial person who's not thinking very hard about it against the backdrop of urgency, with probably three bosses above them shouting at them, going, quick, we need 10 million gowns, surgical gowns. Oh, I can do that. And it's 122 million. Where did they get the numbers from for this? It doesn't excuse it, by the way, but the explanation is, it's often, it's the kind of Occam's razor thing, really, that it's just stupidity, naivety and expediency coming together. David's in Gloucestershire. David, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Very well.
Good.
Yeah, Ian, very quickly, I just think the real scandal with this, and it's all government contracts, well, not all government contracts, but most of them, most of the government contracts, they never seem to ever go round all the companies and get proper quotes for anything. It's just pay. Yeah. But why on earth? And I get it when there's a rush on. You know, we knew what it was like. I remember the time. You know, but why did they pay up front? I never understood that. Why did they pay up front? You know,
you would think that, you know, the government would call the shots, right? They would be able to go, you know, you get this stuff, we'll pay you when we can, but we are also going to check it.
Well, you'd think they'd say, we'll pay 10% now, down payment, 10% upon delivery, and then the rest of it you will have as soon as we've checked it and got it sorted. And
100%.
You know, yeah. I mean, you know, you say about, you know, different companies. I mean, I remember when there was defibrillators were mentioned, and JCB were talking, well, we can bang them out, which sounded to me absolutely sensible. JCB know about manufacturing and mass, you know, that was fine.
I think didn't Dyson put their name into the hat as well? I don't know if they ended up doing anything. But...
I think it was between Dyson and JCB, because I think Dyson and JCB sort of said, look, you give us a working designer, we'll stamp them out because we know what we're doing. Now that to me seems sensible, but it's the way, don't pay until the stuff's delivered and it's checked.
Yeah. Maybe there just was no mechanism of checking this thing. And if you consider, bearing in mind they locked down the world, they locked down the country, they locked down health systems, they locked down people's companies, schools, shops, businesses, pubs, hairdressers, everything was locked down. When you think of it like that, and then you find out they've spent billions of pounds on stuff without really checking things, it kind of makes sense in a way. It's just consistent with the insanity of the rest of the story.
But what they must do now is, with Michelle Mone and her husband, they have got to say, this is criminal fraud, not a limited company, this is criminal fraud. So wherever they are...
But is it fraud if they genuinely thought that they were... Because I don't imagine Michelle... But she didn't go to the pub, did she, with her husband and go, do you know what, I know someone who does some iffy gear. It doesn't work, but let's buy it anyway.
Let them prove otherwise.
I mean, that would let them prove otherwise. But, I mean, that would take a very specific kind of person that would do that in the face of what we were told was a lethal pandemic. You'd have to be below the several layers of hell to deliberately carry out what would be a crime as big as that.
Well, let's just see. But I think she should be arrested. Her and husband should be arrested wherever they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's a contractual thing at the moment, not a criminal thing.
And brought back to the UK, and if necessary, and held in prison until they pay the money. And it's as simple as that.
Simple as that. David, thank you very much indeed. David in Gloucestershire, thank you very much. This one from Steve in Wales is regarding the Manchester synagogue attack. Why is it always the Jewish people in the UK who hide their faith from fear or being spat at, verbal abuse, physical abuse, or even more serious? This is just wrong. Well, we saw the ultimate act today. What appears to be a lethal anti-Semitic. It wasn't just spitting and verbal abuse, but something worse. 2 people are dead, 3 people very serious condition. The gunman dead, or the attacker, I should say, dead by a police gunman. Details coming next, right here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome back. It is the home of Common Sense. There is an awful lot to talk about this afternoon. And, of course, naturally, we're responding to this horrendous incident in North Manchester this morning. 2 people will have died, 3 people seriously injured. The perpetrator of what has happened here, shot dead by police. We are expecting, I think there's 2 press conferences. One happening in Manchester, one happening in London. We'll bring you, not quite sure of the full timings of that, but it's a roundabout, sort of between now and the next 30 minutes. We'll bring you all of that as it happens as well. Also this afternoon, Kemi Badenoch plans to repeal even the Climate Change Act 2008. That, by the way, that was Ed Miliband's work. His mitts are all over that thing. Scrapping net zero targets to prioritise economic growth. She argues the environmental evangelists are up in arms. They're discombobulating, melting like a 1983 iceberg at the moment. We'll have more on that. And Labour plans to tighten asylum rules, ending automatic settlement rights for family reunions for refugees. Also looking at tackling many areas and suggestions that in the next few days, as they start their conference, the Tories could pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights, or suggest that they do. They're, of course, in no position, and might not be for some years, to even enact that, but maybe Nigel Farage will be. Well, details on that as well, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. More of your comments on the way. Now, as Brits struggle with rising costs and poor services, Starmer's focus on attacking Farage somewhat misses the mark. Labour's mudslinging won't stop frustrating voters turning to reform. Instead, Starmer must tackle other areas: food inflation, GP access, fuel costs, real issues that matter. He's spending a lot of time slinging some mud at the moment. Let's speak to the head of features at The Sun. Colin Robertson joins us. Good to see you, Colin. It is kind of a bit of a forgotten part of the story, isn't it, at the moment? Because everyone's talking about, well, what's he going to say to this? And he's going to respond to that. And, you know, Nigel Farage is living rent-free in Keir Starmer's head and everybody else's head, it seems. And, of course, he was name-checked a gazillion times at the Labour Party conference, including by Starmer himself. And so much talk about the battleground being set, even though we're 4 years away from an election. But actually, there's another little matter of actually running a country and, you know, doing things that concern people at the moment. And that's where you've come in on this piece you've written today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, isn't it? If you go to, this is your big showpiece conference of the year, you go to the Labour conference and every single person that gets up there starts going on about Nigel Farage. Starmer kicked it off on Sunday with his interview with Laura Kuenssberg. He's, one of his policies is racist, therefore, and then we start getting into the conference when, everyone was coming up there. Wes Streeting was having a go as a con artist, snake oil salesman. Rachel Reeves was saying he's a threat to British values, he's an enemy of the state, all this sort of stuff. Now, if everybody says the same thing, that does grab the headlines, because they're panicked, because they're thinking, well, it's all about Nigel Farage, he's the opposition, etc., etc. So if you keep mentioning him, then people are going to keep talking about you mentioning him. Yeah. And then, if you grabbed a punter on the street today and said, Labour Party conference, tell me 3 takeaways from the Labour Party conference, they go, probably, he had to go at Farage, and he said he was racist. Yeah. That's the thing. No one's sort of saying, he did say some stuff about what's great about Britain and how they're going to create some new digital thing for the NHS. You can forget all that when you're constantly going on the attack, and that's the thing. Like, you've got a problem with him. Don't talk about him. Yeah. Talk about all the good things that you're doing. Now, you've got to ask, why are they not talking about all the good things that they're doing? Because they're not really doing anything good.
Because there aren't any good things.
There's nothing good to talk about. And everybody looks at him and says, more empty words.
It's sort of beyond parody. I had this sort of image in my head that they all sat around a big boardroom somewhere with one of those massive, impressive oak desks, and sort of worked out their Farage material between them. You going to do snake oil? Yeah, I'll do snake oil. Yeah, I'll do lower than a snake's belly. Get a lot of snake references in there. We'll do all that, because it became almost sort of beyond parody, really,
well, it's kind of desperately cliched stuff, isn't it? I mean, if this was like American comedies have a writer's room, and they do exactly that. They sit around the table. Probably not an oak table. They're sitting around, they're coming up with all the best material. So Snake will say, "Oh, come on, give me something new." He's a racist. "Oh, come on, try something else." All the lines are kind of quite trite. Yeah. We sort of heard them before, but actually, the overwhelming impression that you got is it's quite nasty. You know, it's almost kind of like playground bullying in a way. You know, let's just keep picking him every time he walks past. Goes, "Oh, you're racist, or you're this, or you're that," and that's the thing. And Farage is sitting there, you know, on Sunday he was in a pub in Wiltshire, I think, having a pint, and someone had to say to him, "So, you know, you just basically been called a racist by a Starman." And he's like, "What the hell's going on?" You know, it's sort of like, what all these ad hominem attacks on me? Why don't you get out there and say, "Never mind Nigel Farage, I'm going to make this cheaper for you. I'm going to make that better for you. You're going to get your arm fixed in a hospital. You know, you're not going to be queue jumped by a load of people who've just arrived on a rubber dinghy yesterday."
Correct.
And that's the problem. People sort of say, "Well, look, okay, you know, but Nigel Farage is saying things that I want to hear." Yeah. You know, that's the problem with Keir Starmer, ultimately. Look, I think he means well. He sees this sort of battle with reform as bigger than the Labour Party, and about, you know, he talks about the soul of Britain and all the rest of it. Fine, OK, that's his view. But the reality is, he's a politician. And if he's a politician, he's got to get votes, he's got to get the people on side. He lacks those skills. I mean, we're writing about him today on our page 10, and a story yesterday, and still with the golden ticket stuff, is he's still about him being a human rights lawyer. He was 5 minutes ago human rights lawyer, 5 minutes ago director of public prosecutions. He's not been a politician that long. And actually, I don't think he's a very good politician. He doesn't have that common touch. And I think that's why he's got a problem with Farage, is partly because, yes, he doesn't like what he stands for, but he's probably a little bit jealous that this bloke, Farage, can go and walk into a pub and have a conversation with people and say, I'm into what you're saying, I put my faith in you. Starmer can't do that. Starmer, can you imagine him doing Ed Miliband? A lot of these guys, Wes Streeting. I mean, I like Wes Streeting, but they struggle to connect with people. He can sit around. You could sit around another oak dinner table in North London, and everyone say, "Yes, Keir, absolutely right. The soul of Britain. Let's change this. Let's change that." And this is what people need. This will be better for people. But there's none of those people in the room.
It's this kind of parochial sort of echo chamber. There's the kind of Islington elite sitting around and go, "Wow, you're going to be great, Keir." It's like without anybody actually pointing out, you know, you're not that kind of accessible. You're not sort of the person. You're that Farage thing. I know Farage is very specific, and they don't come along very often. But you know, there was people like Dennis Skinner and Tony Benn and all those old boys that were quite mesmeric when they stood up to speak.
Great characters in the Labour Party. I mean, Tony Blair had that common touch.
Blair did.
And again, he was a North London dinner party guy as well.
True.
And a lawyer.
Yeah.
But he understood politics. He understood a communication and a way to deal with people who are angry and who are cross. And people are a lot crosser now than maybe they were in 1997.
100%.
And so, but he doesn't know how to sort of connect them. And the way to connect to them is fix things for them, make things better. Don't suggest that the rights of people who've been here 5 minutes ago should trump your rights, which is effectively what happened when they did the appeal over the migrant hotels.
And what's interesting as well, just to carry on with the Farage thing, he's arguing against a party that has 5 MPs. I mean, it's not even the official opposition. In fact, the Tories hardly got a mention. Kemi Badenoch wasn't even referred to at all. So, I mean, quite extraordinary. So for Farage, did nobody point out, you know, Morgan McSweeney, who I swear is a Dickens character, but Morgan McSweeney could at some point have gone, "Mate," to Keir Starmer, like, this is going to just sound, it's going to sound at best bitter that you keep referencing Farage, but at worst it's going to sound like you are severely threatened by this man, because he's not the guy in charge. Do yourself a favour, don't mention him at all, because that would have been another technique that they could have gone with, not even reference him.
But also, he has recent history about knowing when people get behind somebody who they think is the future, and then it doesn't work out. And that's what happened with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
So he knows that in the party. Everyone sort of said, Jeremy Corbyn is the future. He went to the polls. It was a disaster. I know people, sort of lefty friends, who are sort of saying, "Oh, God, well, you know, why didn't he win? Why didn't people vote for him?" They didn't want to. And then that's the problem. And as I say in the piece today, that's kind of what happened in America as well. Everyone demonised Trump, did the same sort of tactic. He's this, 100%. He's that, he's a criminal, he's a threat to national security and those things. And what happened? He won by a bigger margin than he did before.
And this is happening, of course, Reform, you know, have people in their swarms going over to Reform. It's not just voters, it's other politicians. We had one on earlier, you know, Danny Kruger, I say high profile, you know, within the Westminster bubble, he's quite high profile. and there's more and more of that to come as well. So it was kind of a weird own goal, really, for Starmer to play on this with such relentlessness.
And exactly what you said, whether they sat around the oak table, maybe they sat around the cabinet table, somewhere along the line, someone said, let's go Farage, these are our attack lines, let's give a takeaway in every... Because why would pretty much every single person had a line to say about him, as you said. It was all sort of divvied up. So the running thread is that, and if you go away from that thinking, well, Labour got nothing to offer other than attacking the guy who's actually telling me things that I want to hear, and that will make my life better. Of course, Farage has got a big challenge ahead of him, and Starmer should know that. So he could have dialed that down and said, look, hey, pal, you've got 4 years. We've got 4 years to fix this, and we're going to go hell for leather to fix it.
100%.
And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we fixed that, how we've gone tough on that, and we've gone tough on that. And you like the stuff we're saying? Good, because there's more coming down the line. And then in 4 years' time, guess what? We fixed a lot of these things. You know it. Farage, where's he? He's gone.
100%, you see. And in fact, the only one I didn't hear... and I feel terrible that I didn't hear Ed Miliband's speech yesterday. But Ed Miliband is a man who I honestly believe is medically insane. I mean, I genuinely think it's only a matter of time before you see somebody chasing him down the road in a white coach. You know,
well, there's no surprise.
Ed, come on, Ed, come out you come.
I mean, there's no surprise that he was pretty much put on there was the last speaker of the whole thing. The headline act had finished and packed up, and he was off. It's like being at a sort of a nightclub, and there's the guy there who's playing 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock, and he's got a couple of records, and everyone's leaving and getting the coat. And so, are you still playing? You know, he's that guy. Like, listen to me, net zero.
Exactly.
Bugger off.
little old Ed hung on in there. But I don't know whether Ed mentioned Farage in his speech. That's the reason. He might be the only person that didn't. But
I think I'd have to check. But certainly it was done. It was the damage was done by then. The damage when it was the crescendo started. Actually, it was like tears at the top of the mountain. He pushed that ball down, and he was there at the bottom to give it another kick along the way. And then, of course, you had the bizarre stuff with David Lammy and his kind of unfounded remarks about Farage flirting with the Hitler Youth, which he then had to backtrack on. And it's like, look, I think they were a bit crazy by then. They were like, Farage, let's just say anything now. And it's like, whoa, hang on. You've got to stick to the facts such as they are.
It did brilliantly spawn a kind of almost a radio stroke TV version of the meme, because we had loads of people contacting us yesterday saying, they remember well when Farage sat down with Mussolini back in the day, and that famous meeting with Jesus he had, it kind of went on and on. It was like almost as if
when people are making jokes about things that you're taking serious, you're done.
Yeah,
you're a busted flush. 100%. They're just laughing at you.
Listen, Colin, great to have you on.
Lovely to be here.
We will speak again soon. Colin Robertson is, of course, head of features at The Sun. Great piece in today's Sun as well. Check it out. Thank you to him. Back with you coming next on Talk.
The base was galvanized. They were happy. And his cabinet members doubled down on it. Didn't Shabana Mahmood say it was worse than racism? For God's sake, what's worse than racism? But when leaders of our country smear millions of ordinary people as racist or a danger to this country, it's no longer politics, Jeremy. It is reckless. Because some people might take that seriously. If you convince them that their neighbor is a threat or racist, some might do whatever it takes to silence them. And that, for me, incites division.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The first of two press conferences from the police. This is the head of counter-terrorism policing, Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor, making a statement in London right now. Here he is.
Specialist teams are now leading the investigation into what happened at Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue and working closely with Greater Manchester Police. As we do this, those who have been killed and injured are at the forefront of our minds, as are their families, friends, and all of those who love them. An attack on our Jewish community today on Yom Kippur is devastating. Communities across the UK would normally be marking this holy day are now grieving and worried about their safety. And I want to be clear, UK policing is mobilising, and it's mobilising fast. Police forces are stepping up patrols across the country at synagogues and Jewish sites, and more widely to provide reassurance to all those communities who have been affected by this incident. At Counter-Terrorism Police, we're deploying all of our capabilities in response to what has happened. And we have resources from across our network involved. We will ensure every piece of intelligence and line of inquiry is interrogated. We're working closely with the security services to ensure we have a full intelligence picture in the coming days and weeks. Following events in Crumpsall today, I'd also like to ask the public to remain vigilant. Please report anything that doesn't feel right to the police and be alert to what is happening in your own communities. Thank you.
There are no questions being taken on the back of that, but that was the head of counter-terrorism policing, Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor, and we understand that Greater Manchester Police Chief Sir Stephen Watson will be reading a statement, arguably in the next few minutes as well. That's certainly around about this time. So we'll cross to Manchester for that second statement. But as you glean from that, security services, counter-terrorism units working across the board, all working together, trying to work out, and of course highlighting the dangers. And this is so sad that you have to consider security around a place of worship. That is something that Jews in this country sadly have got used to. They've had to get used to it in schools, not just synagogues, but this is now clearly taking it up another level. It's a very dark day, and it's happened on a very special and very specific day, Yom Kippur in the Jewish calendar, for obvious reasons, incredibly important and pivotal to the Jewish faith. And that's where we're at. That here we are in the 21st century, we have top cops having to make those kind of announcements. We're upping the security around synagogues. Really, that's not the country I was born in. It's not the country I learned to grow up in, of tolerance and understanding and allowing people to express and be themselves and do so without fear or hindrance in this respect. That's not what I want this place to be either. I'm sure I speak for most people. Let's speak to Chris in Surrey on this appalling, horrific attack this morning. Chris, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I'm absolutely 100% with you, mate. I just think it's about time that the silent majority, those of us that get called far-right thugs because we want to stop illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. You know, we need to stand with the Jewish people because everyone I know is on their side. We need to let them know. Perhaps we need another march like they had 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah. The Jewish people do their march and prove that we can do it peacefully, sensibly, and show that there's millions of us behind them.
Yeah. And that would be, I don't I'm always compromised on this, as I said earlier, Chris, between, I understand free speech and protest, and it's the core of everything. So even when there's a protest that I don't like very much or I don't agree, whether it's the Just Stop Oil people or the anti-Israel people, there's part of me that thinks, you should be allowed to express your view. I think we've gone over that tipping point of tolerance, though, haven't we, somewhere? I mean, I don't want to see people who almost worship a medieval death cult in Hamas, do you?
No, I don't, Ian. And that monster today, that's him making his point. If that's the best that they can do, then they're not welcome in this country.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Chris, thank you. You speak for pretty much everyone, I would suggest. Let's go to Daryl in Lincoln. Back to that issue of politics as well, which we've been talking about. Oh, in fact, let's just give you a little bit of breaking news. Sorry. On the back of this story, just before I go to Daryl, with reference to the attack in Manchester, 2 people have been arrested over this attack. We know what's happened so far. There are 2 confirmed people who have died as a result of the attack, and 3 who are incredibly seriously injured. We know that the gunman, or the attacker, was shot by a police gunman earlier this morning. The Met's head of counter-terrorism, Lawrence Taylor, said it had been declared a terrorist incident, so the perpetrator is dead. However, 2 people have been arrested over the attack, and I would imagine we will see others arrested over the attack as well. Details as it happens. 24 minutes after 3 o'clock. The other story that we've been running as well this afternoon was that of Kemi Badenoch, talking about ditching net zero. She's going to be announcing this kind of stuff in the coming days. It's the Tory party conference. Daryl's in Lincoln. What have you got for us, Daryl? Good afternoon to you. Can the Tory party turn it around?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, I mean, the Tory party really, I mean, they always historically have been a party of stability for the economy. And, I mean, Labour would get in and turn things around for the unions and for the working class people so that you knew you was going to get a bit of a wage rise and that. But then, they'd mess up the economy a fair bit doing it. And then the Conservatives would get back in and stabilise everything and would be good for the economy, and you kind of knew where you stood.
That seemed to be the order of play, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, didn't it? And it was like swings and roundabouts all the time. Whereas this last, the last time the Tories got in, they just seemed to sort of destroy themselves from within. When as soon as David Cameron walked out, it all just fell apart, and everybody lost confidence in them through just mistakes, and then things started to be uncovered and skeletons came out of the cupboard, and everybody kind of sort of thought, what the hell's going on with the Conservatives just became a rabble of like backstabbers, and it was just ridiculous. And I think now the Conservatives, what they need to do is they need to show the country that they're a stabilised unit again. And I mean, if they leave Kemi Badenoch alone and let her be the leader of the party, and they sort of like, all stick with her and stick behind her, and show the country that they're the ones who will get the economy back into order again, and they're going to be the Conservatives that we were kind of used to, then they might have a chance of regaining some confidence in the public. Because she's got
her up her game a bit, though, hasn't she?
She has, because I mean, she's not very strong still with illegal immigrants, and I mean that is the big thing that everybody's concerned about, and I think that's why Reform are getting such strong support, because everybody knows that Reform will tackle the big issues, and I mean, yes, net zero is a big issue, and the economy is a big issue, but at the end of the day, it's what matters to the working class Joe on the street. That's
the bit that because we live. I've talked about this a lot over the last couple of days, Daryl. our appetites have changed, right? The way we want to see politicians and what we want to hear from politicians. We used to, back in the day, people would wake up in the morning, open a newspaper, and that's the first and the last they saw of the news. They might have caught Alistair Burnett reading the news at 10 at some point, but that was kind of it. Now we're a little bit more discerning in what we look for, and I think with Badenoch, it's that she's more accessible than Keir Starmer, but she's got to really show that. She's got to have that anger at the dispatch box. She should be destroying Starmer on a weekly basis, but she's not landing enough at the moment.
I mean, I really do admire the way that she comes across in PMQs. She's got a really good voice and she's a good speaker, but she doesn't always hit the nail on the head on certain issues. And I think, Reform's weakness really is when you had that guy in earlier, I've forgotten his name now, but he was talking
Matthew Said.
Matthew Said. I mean, he really did make a very valid point about Reform, and their weakness is their policies on economics. And I think that's what worries a lot of people about Reform, because I think, I voted for Reform last time, and I'm all for them, and I want to vote for them this next time. But I am worried about their policies on the economics of this country.
Yeah, well, he said, you heard what he said, that their economic policies are to the left of Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, and that is a big concern.
I know that's his, he's crunched the numbers and that's his conclusion. And I'm sure Nigel Farage would laugh at that and say, are you serious, dear boy? But that's, he's saying we need to be a more self-reliant country, back to what we used to be, true conservatism. Back in 2001, we were doing that. All the figures looked good, GDP, extra, all of that stuff, debt, everything was kind of lined up nicely, and then it's gone absolutely pear-shaped. Listen, Daryl, I've got to move for no other reason than time. Thank you very much indeed for that. A great call from Daryl in Lincoln. I love these conversations about where our politics is going. I do want to talk more about Manchester as well. Lottie is in Lancashire. Lottie, what would you like to say on this? Good afternoon to you.
Get in the bin, that's all I can say to you.
Nothing wrong with that.
Everybody's been saying that in my family. Anyway, what I want to say is this. I think that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer have got to take some blame for this. I'm terribly sorry, but they have. We've got Palestine on every other week down in London. We've got them making Palestine a state. Saying to all the Israel people, it doesn't matter, you all atrocities that they did to you, it doesn't matter, but we're going to still make them a Palestinian state. So they basically come out and said, just go and do whatever you want to the Jews. And now, this is another point I have to make, is that I'm a Christian. I go to church every Sunday, and I felt very, very uneasy recently, because I sit at the back of the church, and nobody knows who's going to come into the church. The church doors are open.
There is that feeling of not feeling safe.
All of us have got to be careful. We have to watch out everywhere we go now. I feel so upset when I go to church that I feel that I have to keep watching over my shoulder. But I'm sorry, but the Labour Party has got to take some responsibility for this because of all the nasty, hateful things they said. And what did Nigel Farage say after Starmer's speech? Well, speech, if you can call it that. What did he say? Just wait and see if anybody comes out and does anything really nasty, either the left or and what's happened 2 days later, bosh.
Yeah. Whether there's a connection between that or not, the optics are awful in that respect, because it is, and of course you've just had Hamas thanking a British Prime Minister for recognising them. I know he will say, well, it wasn't Hamas, it was the Palestinian, but, nuances and all the rest of it are dicey at this moment in time. Lottie, thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry to hear that you have to worship in fear in your church as well. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk. And, of course, we await Sir Stephen Watson, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, who will be giving a statement as well on what has happened this morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 25 to 4 is the time. We're getting updates, of course, on what has happened in Manchester this morning, this horrendous act of terrorism that took place just outside a synagogue. It appears that the perpetrator, who was shot dead by police, was perhaps hell-bent on making his way. I mean, there were people in the synagogue. It's Yom Kippur. They've been there early. Clearly a crucial day, a very important day in the Jewish calendar, and it didn't pan out for the people in that synagogue in Crumpsall earlier today. We are expecting a statement from the Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor. Let's cross to Alex Farrell, Talk reporter, who's there where this statement, Alex, is going to be made shortly, we understand. We assume we've all seen this, how it sort of plays out. This is an update. We've heard from the Met so far. They're clearly all working together, but this is clearly, it's obviously an ongoing investigation. We know that 2 people have been arrested in addition to the person, the perpetrator that was shot dead. We can't really overstate how both horrific and seismic this incident is. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yes, an awful day for the people of North Manchester here. I'm in Crumpsall in a community centre awaiting the arrival of Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Sir Stephen Watson. We understand he's delayed. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and there's sirens all over Manchester, cordons all around the site of the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue. It's located in an area in North Manchester which is very diverse. Lots of different cultures and religions, and everybody I've spoken to today from all faiths and all areas of Manchester and indeed the world have come together in sorrow after this incident that occurred this morning. 9:30 was the first time we heard about it. Reports of a man driving a car into the area of the synagogue. He then got out the car and proceeded to try and stab people going to the synagogue. Luckily, some very brave members of the public stopped him, and I believe one member of the public particularly was to thank for blocking the door, the security at the synagogue, thankfully preventing any further injury or loss of life. We do know that two innocent people were killed today. 3 people are currently in hospital in a serious condition. As you say, Ian, the investigation's ongoing. 2 further arrests, so we're told, have been made.
Yeah.
And police are saying, Ian, that they believe they know the identity of the attacker. So hopefully in a few minutes' time we'll hear from Sir Stephen Watson to elaborate more.
Indeed. And interestingly, the death of the 2 people this morning, I don't think we have any detail as to whether that was because we understand a car went erratic and started driving into people, and then one assumes somebody got out of that car and attempted to carry out further attacks. Do we have any information yet as to how this panned out? Were these people that died because they were hit by the vehicle or because they were attacked after the vehicle had stopped?
We're hearing mixed reports, Ian. There are videos circulating online of a car marauding into people. There's also videos of the alleged attacker with some kind of knife or weapon. We only found out in the last hour or so that the attacker has died as a result of being shot by members of the police. And that took so long to come out, Ian, because he was wearing what was perceived to be some kind of device. So, of course, the authorities couldn't get close to him, but they have now confirmed that he has indeed died. Special forces were deployed, actually, for this, Ian. It's called Operation Plato. That involves police, fire, ambulance whenever there's a marauding terror attack, and I believe it's the first time since London Bridge attack in 2017 that special forces of this nature have been deployed on British soil. We've heard from Keir Starmer, of course, describe the attack as appalling and shocking, and he's on his way back from Denmark to hold a Cobra meeting. We've heard comments from Kemi Badenoch calling it outrageous, vile and disgusting, and the King and Queen have sent their thoughts and prayers to Manchester, but we're still awaiting further information about the attacker and indeed why he chose to do this horrendous attack on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar.
Maybe that was the point, one would understandably assume. Alex, thank you. We will speak again soon. Alex Farrell, talk reporter there at the venue where we will be hearing from the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester coming up, Sir Stephen Watson. We'll bring you that when we do it, slightly delayed. Keir Starmer, as we speak, has literally in the last 10 seconds arrived back in Downing Street, so there'll be a Cobra meeting there, and we'll hear something on that throughout the course of the afternoon as well. So we await the comments from the Chief Constable. That's coming to you as soon as we get the nod that it's going to happen. Let's go to Tom in Glasgow on this attack. Tom, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Far away.
Thanks. First of all, my condolences go with all the families and the people affected to this, again, tragedy today. My concern is I worry about where we're going here because we seem to be a country who allows terrorism. It allows it to the extent that we are not easily deporting people who are found to be involved in terrorism. And we're continuing down the same.
We just lost your line there, Tom. I would guess you're probably still there. Maybe we just need to reconnect at some point. Let me just bring you a few comments as well that are coming in from you on the way as well. This one in from Dave in South Gloucestershire referenced the Conservatives, which is the other big issue being discussed. Kemi Badenoch making announcements about ditching net zero. We have Matthew Said, the Sunday Times journalist, in with us. Always a very powerful, very persuasive speaker, Matthew. Once stood as a Labour candidate. He's now going to support the Conservatives, unless they really muck it up. But he's saying, no, give them a benefit of the doubt. He thinks they could be streets ahead. Dave says, Mr. Said and your last caller have both missed the point. Promising to do things, radical announcements are all easy to do, but both parties have a reputation for not delivering on promises. Kemi herself, when in the Tory government, trumpeted how she was going to get rid of thousands of EU regulations, but in the end got rid of about 600. Why? Probably the pressure from the EU supporting section of her party. Why would things change in a Tory government? The same pressure groups are still there and have the same political views. We are the ones being asked to take a leap of faith to vote for them in again after years of failure to deliver. And that's going to take, that is the job. Dave's just described the job, the real tricky difficulty of the job. It's not just saying you're going to do it, it's being able to do it, say it with absolute credibility and surety, to the point that people believe it. So this is a serious person. They're not into sound bites, they're into serious policy. They want to take the Conservatives back to being a proper Conservative party without any additional bells and whistles. I think we've got Tom back in Glasgow. Tom, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
That's all right, not a problem. Do continue.
I was just saying, I do feel now we're in a situation whereas we get more and more loners involved in terrorist acts in our country.
Yep.
And we find it hard, our government, for whatever reason, this is our country, they seem to find it hard to deport them out of this country. Yeah. Whereas I feel as I'm looking for our Prime Minister to come out after the Cobra meeting, because we have many meetings as you want, but we need to change the laws to suit the British person, the British people, because that is a shocking act again today. We've had many of these in the past, and I don't think it'll ever be the last, because this is the way these people think.
Yeah.
And as long as we continue with open borders, letting people in that we don't know about, we don't know who they are, what age they are, our country is prone to terrorism. And I'm really worried about it for the future.
You're absolutely right, because these kind of, whether they're lone attacks or slightly more orchestrated, but you're bang on. There's enough evidence for us all to suspect that this is not going to be the last sort of act, regardless of who carries it out under what cause or whatever. We will arguably see more. Tom, thank you very much indeed for that, Tom in Glasgow. Let's go to Cheshire. This is Mark. How you doing, Mark?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon to you.
My thoughts and prayers are out to the victims of this horrendous terrorist atrocity that happened today.
Correct.
But I'm also thinking about the policemen. I've seen some horrendous media today of the policemen actually finishing off the terrorists that committed this awful atrocity, and effectively their faces have been beamed all over the world. Now, the reason I'm making the phone call is that Panorama put out a documentary last night saying how bad and racist, misogynist the police are. That there was an incident where Chris Cabba was murdered was actually shot by an armed police, and he was pilloried for chased around the place. His life was made unbelievable, and I just hope that this was done in the middle of the day, so these two policemen, their faces were open to the media of the world. I just hope that people will actually look at what these police did. They made a split-second decision to protect the community, and their life could be pilloried, or you could end up with somebody like a Diane Abbott equivalent turning around and saying this was a racist attack.
Do you know what? Well, yeah, I mean, that's only a matter of time, isn't it, before some clown comes up with that one. But you're absolutely right. Ordinarily, we wouldn't get the identity of an officer that had to use lethal force in the line of duty. But, of course, it's the 21st century, Mark, isn't it? Social media, and, you know, there was appears to be a male that was filming all of this. I'm not blaming him, by the way. It's just his footage has then been uploaded and taken, and it's there for all to see. But it does leave the police particularly those officers, in a pretty precarious position, because you ordinarily would have full anonymity after an incident like this.
Yeah, I just hope and pray that these policemen receive the correct amount of protection. Yeah. They didn't. Both of those men didn't wake up this morning saying, "I am going to lethally shoot someone today."
Correct.
Nobody would ever want to do that. They made a split-second decision to save members of the community, and for that they should be lauded. They have actually done the job they've been paid to do.
Absolutely bang on. Mark, thank you very much indeed for that. Mark in Cheshire. And of course, we are talking about a situation where the police were not just facing someone who they had suspected of carrying out horrendous, and as it turned out, murderous acts, but somebody who was wearing something around their waist which looked every bit like some kind of explosive device in that context, left with no option. But it's not a decision that any police officer would take lightly, and in normal circumstances it would be something they would carry out, last resort territory, but they would carry out anonymously. You would never get to know who the officer was, but you know, we live in a 24-hour social media world. So those images, they can't be taken back now. Whilst news organisations will blur faces, social media that kind of doesn't do that. 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's cross immediately over to Manchester. Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Sir Stephen Watson is reading a statement now.
Certain of this fact, it is premature to set out this detail at this juncture. In addition, I can confirm that 2 other individuals have been arrested in connection with this incident, and urgent inquiries are ongoing. We can confirm that 2 members of our Jewish community have sadly died as a result of this attack. Following a rapid response, armed officers from Greater Manchester Police intercepted the offender, and he was fatally shot by officers within 7 minutes of the original call. 4 further people remain in hospital, having suffered a variety of serious injuries, and their treatment is ongoing, and our thoughts are with them and their families. Inquiries are moving at pace, and very visible and proactive policing activity is ongoing across Greater Manchester and beyond. Updates will be provided as soon as is practicable. Our priority is to keep the public safe. At this time, we know that a car was driven directly at members of the public outside the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue on Middleton Road, Crumpsall, in Manchester. The driver of the car was seen then to attack people with a knife. He was wearing about his body a vest which had the appearance of an explosive device. There were a large number of worshippers attending the synagogue at the time of this attack, but thanks to the immediate bravery of security staff and the worshippers inside, as well as the fast response of the police, the attacker was prevented from gaining access. All those inside were safely contained until police were able to confirm that it was safe to leave the premises. Yom Kippur is a day where we see our Jewish community attending their places of worship, places where they and their families should feel entirely safe from harm. I want to share my gratitude to all of those members of the public who called the police as soon as they saw what was happening. This allowed the quick response from our officers, who were able to act swiftly and bravely to bring this horrendous attack to an end. I also want to thank our partners from the other emergency services, local authorities, and the health service, who have provided their ongoing support to us throughout the day and will continue so to do over the coming days. I know that today's horrific events will have a significant impact on all of our communities, not only in Greater Manchester, but across our country. There will be lots of questions that people would like answers to, and quickly. But please understand that some of this will take time. What I can say is that the highly visible response to these dreadful incidents will be sustained as we work to understand the full circumstances of what has happened. I know that you will all join me in keeping those directly affected by what has happened in our thoughts and prayers. There are grieving families and communities at the heart of this, in Greater Manchester and beyond. I would therefore ask that people refrain from sharing disturbing and insensitive content online. If you have information, then share it with the police. We stand with all of those affected and will continue to do everything in our power to keep our communities safe. I thank you.
And that is the statement from Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Sir Stephen Watson, reading out that statement there, essentially explaining a little more about the details, the fact that the perpetrator of this horrific attack was shot dead 7 minutes after the original call to police. There are still people in hospital in a serious condition, we understand. And in addition to the perpetrator who was shot, there were 2 other people later in the day, a couple of hours ago now, that were arrested in connection with this. And of course, his final point was to ask people to refrain from putting too much material onto social media. I mean, he has to say that, but, you know, frankly, good luck with that, because sadly the world we live in now doesn't quite work like that, Peter Cardwell.
There's a national broadcaster which has put some of that footage and at least one of those very disturbing pictures on their output at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be very interesting to see what people do in relation to Sir Stephen Watson's thoughts on that. I thought he showed a lot of leadership in that message. We will, of course, be devoting all of our show today on Talk Drive to this horrendous attack. We'll be talking to all sorts of Jewish leaders. My question is, when you shout things like globalise the Intifada, when you recognise a Palestinian state and reward Hamas, what did you think was going to happen? How were people going to take this? What were terrorists going to do? Look at what they've done today on the holiest day of the year for Christians watching. I know we have a lot of Christian viewers and listeners. This is like Easter Sunday or Christmas Day for Jewish people. This is an absolutely horrendous, vile, awful attack on one of the holiest days, the holiest day of the year for our Jewish friends and neighbours. We need to stand in solidarity with them. It is disgusting that this has happened.
Keir Starmer is holding a Cobra meeting probably now. He arrived back in Downing Street around about half an hour ago. He was due to be at a European summit in Denmark. I think no sooner than he arrived, he pretty much came straight back again. I guess we might hear something from that Cobra meeting.
I would be very surprised if we don't hear from the Prime Minister as soon as that is over. I expect a clip will come out around 5 o'clock. We'll see what happens. We'll bring that to you in Talk Drive. I know there are some other senior figures. For example, Steve Reid, he's the Communities Secretary, and he's wrestling at the moment with a definition of Islamophobia. He's meant to be someone who's in touch with all the different minority communities, including Jewish people. Antonio Romeo, who is the Permanent Secretary, most senior civil servant at the Home Office, was seen going into the Cabinet Office as well. COBRA, which actually stands for Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, that is where they will coordinate the response to this attack. But already counter-terrorism officers heavily involved